Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Documentary. Clark Schaefer had spent 3 years building his reputation as a documentary filmmaker who went where others wouldn't. His previous film, Silence Voices, had exposed a human trafficking ring operating through legitimate adoption agencies in the Pacific Northwest. It won him a Peabody Award and enough industry respect that distributors now took his calls. But it also taught him that the most dangerous predators wore expensive suits and donated to children's charities. His current project would make Silence Voices look like a warm-up act. For 8 months, Clark had been documenting a story that started with a suicide that wasn't a suicide. Dr. Marcus Harding, a research oncologist at Providence Medical Center, had allegedly jumped from his office window. The police report was neat and tidy: depression, work stress, mounting debt. But Marcus's sister Harriet Walter refused to accept it. She'd hired Clark with her life savings because no journalist would touch the story. "My brother was developing a treatment protocol that actually worked," Harriet had told him during their first meeting, her hands trembling as she pushed a file across the table. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer patients, 12 of them, showing complete remission. Then suddenly his research was contaminated, his funding pulled, and 2 weeks later he's dead. Clark had learned to trust that trembling hand's instinct. He'd followed the money, the connections, the carefully buried trail of altered medical records and silenced patients. Every lead pointed to one man, Felix Levy. Levy was a pharmaceutical venture capitalist who specialized in acquiring promising drug patents, then either developing them at his own pace or shelving them entirely if they threatened existing revenue streams. His company, Meridian Biocapital, controlled enough of the oncology drug market that doctors whispered his name with equal parts fear and disgust. But no one had ever proven he'd killed to protect his empire. Clark was about to change that. He glanced at his watch, 7:43 p.m. His wife Tara would be wondering where he was. He told her he was meeting a source, which was true, though he'd left out that the source was Jimmy Byers, a former Meridian lab technician who'd finally agreed to go on camera about the falsified drug trials. Jimmy had been paranoid for weeks, and tonight he'd sounded genuinely terrified on the phone. The interview location kept changing. First a parking garage, then a coffee shop. Now they were supposed to meet at a park near the waterfront. Clark's instincts, honed by years of investigative work, were screaming that something was wrong, but he needed Jimmy's testimony. Without it, he had circumstantial evidence and the word of the dead man's grieving sister. He'd grab a taxi outside his editing studio in the Pearl District, too focused on reviewing his questions to notice the route the driver was taking. Only when they'd been driving for 20 minutes did Clark look up and realize they were heading in the wrong direction. "Hey, the waterfront is." "I know where you're going, Mr. Schaefer," the driver interrupted. He was an older black man, maybe 60, with silver threading through his close-cropped hair. His eyes met Clark's in the rearview mirror with an intensity that made Clark's hand move instinctively toward the door handle. "But you're not going there tonight." The driver's nameplate read, Wilson Pittman. "Look, I don't know what." Wilson reached into his jacket. Clark tensed, his mind racing through scenarios, but the driver only pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it back without taking his eyes off the road. $20,000 cash, Wilson said quietly. "Get out at the next light. Don't go home tonight. Don't call your wife. Don't go to the police. Disappear for 72 hours. Then take that money and get on a plane. Mexico, Canada, I don't care. Just get out of Portland." Clark's hand shook as he opened the envelope. Crisp $100 bills, neatly stacked. This wasn't a joke. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows what's waiting for you at that waterfront meeting. Someone who knows what's waiting for you at home." Wilson's voice was steady but urgent. "Jimmy Byers is dead, Mr. Schaefer. Has been for 3 hours. The police haven't found him yet, but they will. And when they do, they're going to find your fingerprints at the scene, your DNA, and a confession he supposedly recorded where he admits you paid him to fabricate his testimony about Meridian Biocapital." The words hit Clark like a physical blow. "That's impossible. I haven't seen Jimmy in 5 days ago. Your editing studio, 11 a.m. You gave him coffee in a ceramic mug that's now at his apartment, covered in your prints. You're being framed, and it's so airtight that. Wilson's phone rang. The ringtone was ordinary, a generic chime, but the effect on Wilson Pittman was anything but. His brown skin went ashen. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly Clark could see the whites of his knuckles. For a long moment, Wilson just stared at the phone vibrating in the cup holder. Then he answered, putting it on speaker. You were supposed to deliver him 2 hours ago. The voice was male, smooth, with a faint trace of a South African accent. Felix Levy. Clark had heard enough of his voice in recorded interviews to recognize it. I'm disappointed, Wilson. After everything I did for Elisa, this is how you repay me. Wilson's jaw clenched. She's paid enough. We're done. Done. A soft laugh. You're done when I say you're done. When Dr. Reynolds says you're done. Now, I'm tracking your cab right now, and unless Mr. Schaefer is delivered to the waterfront in the next 15 minutes, the daughter-in-law loses another kidney. Dr. Reynolds is standing by. It would be a shame if Elisa died because you got sentimental about a stranger. The line went dead. Clark's mind reeled. Wilson Pittman, this random taxi driver, was working for Levy. But the fear in the man's eyes wasn't the fear of an employee. It was the terror of a father watching his family burn. Elisa Reynolds, Clark said slowly, his documentarian's brain connecting dots even as his survival instinct screamed at him to run. Your daughter-in-law. She's been sick. Wilson didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Kidney disease. And Felix Levy controls her access to transplants. To treatment. Clark leaned forward. Jesus Christ. How many people does he own like this? Enough. Wilson's voice was hollow. My son Robert died in Iraq. Elisa was 6 months pregnant, and the grief triggered early labor. Complications. Her kidneys started failing. She's on dialysis 3 times a week, and she's got a little girl, my granddaughter Mabel, who's 4 years old. Levy found out. He had his people approach me 6 months ago. Said he could move Elisa to the top of the transplant list. All I had to do was drive a cab and occasionally pick up specific fares. And do what with them? Wilson met his eyes in the mirror. You're the first one I couldn't go through with. Clark processed this at lightning speed. He'd built a career on reading people, on seeing past the lies to the truth underneath. Wilson Pittman wasn't a bad man. He was a desperate one, caught in the same trap Levy specialized in, using people's love against them. Where does Levy think you're taking me? Warehouse near the waterfront. Old pharmaceutical storage facility Meridian owns. There are 3 men waiting. They'll make your death look like you attacked Jimmy Byers, and he killed you in self-defense before succumbing to his injuries. Murder-suicide. Your documentary dies with you, and the story becomes about an obsessed filmmaker who couldn't accept that his conspiracy theory was wrong. The light ahead turned red. This was Clark's chance to run. He could take the money, disappear, protect himself. Let Wilson face whatever consequences came from defying Levy. But Clark thought about Harriet Walters' trembling hands, about the 12 cancer patients who'd been cured and then mysteriously relapsed after Marcus Harding died, about Elisa Reynolds and 4-year-old Mabel Pittman, about how many other families Levy had destroyed. He thought about Tara, his wife of 6 years, waiting at home. Tara, who'd supported his documentary work even when it meant months of him chasing leads and sleeping 4 hours a night. Tara, who he'd been planning to surprise with a weekend trip to the coast after he finished this project. And he made a decision. Take me home, Clark said. Wilson's eyes widened. Didn't you hear what I heard you. Take me home. I need to get something, and then we're going to fix this. Both of us. Clark pulled out his phone. But first, I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to document everything. Chapter 2. The Betrayal. The Schaefer house sat in the Alameda neighborhood, a modest craftsman bungalow that Clark and Tara had bought 3 years ago. It had taken most of their savings, but Tara had loved the built-in bookshelves and the fig tree in the backyard. Clark had converted the second bedroom into an editing suite, spending countless hours there piecing together footage that told stories no one else would tell. As Wilson parked down the street, Clark felt that familiar documentary filmmaker's instinct again, the sense that something was wrong with the picture. The living room light was on, which was normal. Tara's Honda Civic was in the driveway, also normal. But there was a second car parked in front of the house, a silver BMW that Clark didn't recognize. "Maybe you should wait," Wilson said, his earlier panic replaced by something like resignation. "If Levy knows about your home, he knows about everything." Clark was already moving, his phone set to record audio in his jacket pocket. "Stay here. If I'm not out in 20 minutes, drive away. Take that money and help your daughter-in-law." Clark approached the house from the side, moving quietly through the shadows. Years of documentary work had taught him how to be invisible when necessary. He could hear voices through the kitchen window, Tara's laugh, bright and unguarded in a way he hadn't heard in months, and a man's voice, smooth and confident. He peered through the window. Tara sat at their kitchen table, wearing the blue dress she'd bought for their anniversary dinner last month. Across from her sat a man Clark immediately recognized from his research, Daniel Hatfield, Felix Levy's personal attorney and fixer. Hatfield was in his late 40s, with the kind of artificial good looks that came from expensive personal trainers and better plastic surgeons. But what froze Clark's blood wasn't just seeing Hatfield in his kitchen. It was the way Tara reached across the table and squeezed his hand. The intimate familiarity of the gesture. "He'll be dead by morning," Hatfield was saying. "Felix's people are efficient. It'll look like a murder-suicide with that source of his. The documentary footage will disappear, and you'll be the grieving widow." Tara's face showed no horror, no shock, just relief. "How long do I have to play grieving?" she asked. 6 months, minimum. A year would be better for appearances." Hatfield smiled. "Then we can be together properly. The life insurance will clear $500,000 like we planned. Plus, once the documentary is buried, Felix has promised me a partnership share in Meridian. We'll be set, Tara. Everything we talked about." Clark's mind reeled. He wanted to disbelieve it, to find an explanation that made his wife of 6 years something other than a co-conspirator in his murder. But the pieces fit too perfectly. The way Tara had been pushing him to take a break from the documentary. How she'd suddenly become friends with Jody Mercer, who worked in pharmaceutical sales, probably one of Levy's plants. The girls' weekends she'd been taking. How long had she been planning this? "I just want to be sure," Tara said, and Clark heard genuine anxiety in her voice. "Felix promised there wouldn't be any problems? No investigation that could trace back to us." "Tara," Hatfield's voice was patronizing. "Felix Levy has made 17 problems disappear in the past 5 years. Doctors, journalists, researchers, whistleblowers. Your husband is just another idealist who got in over his head. The police will find exactly what we want them to find. You'll be completely in the clear." 17. Clark's documentarian's mind filed that number away even as his personal world collapsed. 17 murders. Marcus Harding had been just one. In Clark's research, all his footage already handled. Felix has someone who can access his cloud storage remotely. Everything he's ever filmed about Meridian will be corrupted beyond recovery by midnight. His backup drives here, Hatfield gestured vaguely. "We'll collect those after. It'll look like a technical failure. Happens all the time with documentary filmmakers." "Tragic." Tara nodded, satisfied. Then she leaned forward and kissed Hatfield. It wasn't a peck. It was the kiss of lovers who'd been together for a while, comfortable and passionate in equal measure. Clark stepped back from the window, his whole body numb. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of thinking he'd found his partner, his equal, someone who believed in the same things he did. And all of it had been a lie, or at least had become one. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and checked his cloud storage. Hatfield was right. His account showed an ongoing synchronization error. Whoever Levy had hired was good. In another hour, 3 years of work would be gone. But Clark Schaefer hadn't survived this long as an investigative documentarian by being stupid. He'd learned from watching his first documentary die when a source's computer was seized. Every interview, every piece of footage, every scrap of evidence he'd gathered existed in 3 places: the cloud, his home backup drives, and a physical location no one knew about. 5 years ago, after silenced voices had made him enemies, Clark had rented a storage unit under a false name. Inside was a fireproof safe containing hard drives with copies of every project he'd ever worked on. It was paranoid, maybe, but paranoia kept documentarians alive. He'd never imagined he'd need it to protect himself from his own wife. Clark moved silently back to Wilson's cab. The older man looked up, reading something in Clark's face. "You saw," Wilson said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." Clark's voice was steady, which surprised him. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the documentarian's instinct to observe rather than react. "My wife is sleeping with Levy's lawyer. They're planning to kill me and collect life insurance." Wilson exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry. Don't be. You just saved my life." Clark looked at his house one more time, at the warm light in the kitchen window, at everything he'd thought was his future. "Now we're going to save yours. And we're going to make Felix Levy pay for every single life he's destroyed." "Ow!" Wilson's voice held no hope. "He owns judges, police, doctors. He's got enough money and power to make both of us disappear without a trace." Clark smiled, and it was the smile of someone who just found a new documentary subject, the most important one of his life. Because Felix Levy doesn't know the first rule of documentary filmmaking. Everyone makes mistakes when they think no one's watching. And I've been watching him for 8 months. He held up his phone. "I just recorded everything your daughter-in-law's captor and my wife said. That's evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. But more importantly, it's leverage. And I'm going to use every trick I've learned in 10 years of investigative journalism to bring his entire empire crashing down." You're talking about taking on a man who's murdered 17 people and gotten away with it. 18, Clark corrected. "You forgot Jimmy Byers." He met Wilson's eyes. "I'm not going to disappear, Wilson. I'm not going to run. I'm going to do what I do best, tell a story. But this time, I'm going to make sure it has an ending where the bad guys lose." Wilson was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "First, a place to stay that isn't on any record. Can you help with that?" "My son's old apartment. Rent's paid up for 6 months. I couldn't bring myself to clear it out after he died. It's in Robert's name. Nobody would think to look there." "Perfect. Second, I need to get my evidence from a storage unit without being followed. Third," Clark pulled up a contact on his phone. "I need to call in every favor I'm owed and find people Levy hasn't bought yet. I know a federal prosecutor who hates pharmaceutical fraud. I know a tech expert who can trace his cybercrimes. And I know Harriet Walter, who deserves to see her brother's killer brought to justice. And your wife." Clark's expression hardened. Tara made her choice. She's part of Levy's machine now, which means she's part of the story. He looked back at the house. "Before this is over, everyone is going to know what Felix Levy really is. And everyone who helped him, including my wife, is going to face the consequences." Chapter 3, The Evidence. Robert Castaneda's apartment was in a converted industrial building in southeast Portland. It still had his furniture, his books, his photos from his Army deployment. Wilson had kept paying the rent, like a shrine to his son who'd never come home. Clark spent the first hour there documenting everything from a night, uploading encrypted copies of his recordings to multiple secure servers, timestamping everything, building a digital paper trail that couldn't be erased. Then he made calls. The first was to Harriet Walter. "Clark," she sounded exhausted. "It's almost midnight. Did something happen?" "Everything happened. I need you to listen carefully and not interrupt." For the next 10 minutes, he laid it all out. Jimmy Byers' death, the frame job, Tara's betrayal, Wilson's story about Elisa Reynolds. "I need to know, are you still in this fight? Because it just got a lot more dangerous." There was a long pause. Then, "My brother was murdered because he wanted to save lives. You're telling me Levy has killed 17 other people and no one stopped him?" "Hell yes, I'm still in." "What do you need?" "Money, for starters. I can't access my accounts without leaving a trail. And I need you to contact someone for me, a prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office named Charlie Copeland. Tell him Clark Schaefer has evidence of multiple homicides connected to pharmaceutical fraud, and I need immunity and protection in exchange for testimony." "Done. What else?" "Get somewhere safe. If Levy realizes I'm still alive and uncooperative, he might use you as leverage." After hanging up with Harriet, Clark called Leon Huynh, investigative tech journalist he'd worked with on Silence Voices. Leon answered on the first ring, wide awake despite the hour. "Clark? Dude, I heard you were working on something big. Tell me you've got another award winner in the works." Better. I've got a conspiracy that goes all the way to the top of the pharmaceutical industry. 17 confirmed murders, and I need your help exposing it before they kill me too. Leon was silent for exactly 3 seconds. I'm listening. Clark filled him in, focusing on the tech angle. The remote corruption of his cloud storage. The sophisticated surveillance network. Levy must have to know about Wilson's daughter-in-law. The coordination required to frame him for murder so quickly. This is Meridian Biocapital? Leon's keyboard was already clicking in the background. Oh man, Clark. I've been hearing rumors about their data security practices for years. They've got this subsidiary company, TechMedic Solutions, that supposedly handles medical data management but is really just a front for corporate espionage and digital warfare. If you're saying they just corrupted your cloud storage, can you trace it? Maybe. Probably. Yes. More clicking. Give me your login credentials. I'm going to see if I can track the breach back to its source. If we can prove it came from a TechMedic's IP address, that's evidence of corporate crime. Federal crime. While Leon worked, Clark made his third call to Nicholas Lucas, a former FBI agent turned private investigator who'd helped Clark verify sources on his last documentary. Nicholas was semi-retired now, living in Seattle, but he owed Clark a favor for keeping his name out of the credits when silenced voices implicated some of his former colleagues. Clark Schaefer. Never thought I'd hear from you again after the shitstorm your last doc created. Nicholas's voice was gravel and cigarettes. What trouble are you in? The kind where a pharmaceutical billionaire is trying to kill me. Felix Levy? Clark blinked. You know him? Know of him. The bureau's had a file on Meridian Biocapital for 3 years, but every investigation gets shut down from above. Political pressure, they said. But guys like me who've been around long enough, we recognize a protection racket when we see one. A pause. You got proof he's dirty? I've got recordings of his lawyer planning my murder. I've got a witness whose family is being held hostage. I've got 8 months of documentary footage showing a pattern of suspicious deaths around anyone who threatens his drug patents. But you don't have the smoking gun. Not yet. That's why I'm calling. I need someone who knows how to investigate like the FBI, but isn't constrained by politics or bureaucracy. Someone who can dig into Levy's organization and find the connections that prove it's a criminal enterprise. Nicholas laughed, a dry sound. You want me to build a RICO case against one of the richest men in the pharmaceutical industry. I want you to help me bury him. Another pause. Clark could hear Nicholas lighting his cigarette. I'm in. But Clark, if we're going after Levy, we need to be smarter than everyone who tried before. That means building an airtight case before we make a move. No heroics, no confrontations. We document everything, we build leverage, and we don't show our hand until we're ready to end this. Agreed. I'll send you everything I have. Encrypted. One more thing, Nicholas said. Your wife. If she's working with Levy's lawyer, she's probably been reporting on you for months. Every source you met, every lead you followed. Assume Levy knew about it within hours. Which means your documentary is compromised. They've been ahead of you this whole time. The realization hit Clark like a physical blow. Jimmy Byers hadn't been paranoid. He'd been right to be terrified. How many sources had Clark burned by trusting Tara? How many people were now in danger? Then we need to work fast, Clark said. And Wilson Pittman, the cab driver who warned me. He needs protection. His daughter-in-law is being held hostage through medical coercion. I'll look into it. In the meantime, stay dark. No electronic trails, no credit cards, no contact with anyone from your old life. You're a ghost until we're ready to strike. After the calls, Clark sat in Robert Castaneda's apartment surrounded by a dead soldier's possessions and let himself process what had happened. In the span of 6 hours, he'd lost his wife, his home, his documentary, and nearly his life. Felix Levy had outmaneuvered him at every turn. But Levy had also made a mistake. He'd let Clark live, and he'd underestimated what an investigative journalist could do when pushed to the edge. Clark had spent a decade learning how to expose secrets, how to find the truth buried under layers of lies, how to tell stories that powerful people didn't want told. Now he was going to tell the most important story of his life. Wilson emerged from the bedroom where he'd been trying to sleep. You should rest. Tomorrow we need to. Tomorrow we're going to visit your daughter-in-law. Clark interrupted. I need to document her story, get her on camera if she's willing. Levy's power comes from secrecy. He controls people by threatening what they love in private, where no one can see. The moment we shine a light on it, his leverage disappears. She's terrified, Clark. She's got a 4-year-old daughter to protect. And she'll keep being terrified until Levy is stopped. But I understand if she says no. Clark looked at the older man. Wilson, why did you warn me? You could have delivered me to that warehouse, saved your daughter-in-law, gone back to your life. Why risk everything? Wilson was quiet for a long moment. My son Robert wrote me a letter before his last deployment. He said he was proud to serve because he believed some things were worth dying for, protecting innocent people from those who'd abuse power. When he was killed, I thought that was bullshit. Noble sacrifice, patriotism, empty words. He met Clark's eyes. But when Levy told me to deliver you to die, and I saw the fear in your eyes, all I could think was, Robert died, so people like you could tell the truth. If I helped murder you, everything my son believed in was a lie. Clark felt something shift in his chest. Your son will be proud of you. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just an old fool who's going to get us both killed. Wilson smiled grimly. But I've been a coward long enough. If we're doing this, let's do it right. Clark nodded. First thing tomorrow, we're going to see Elisa. Then we're going to get my evidence from storage. And then we're going to start building the case that brings down Felix Levy's empire. Outside, Portland slept unaware that one of its most powerful residents was about to face his reckoning. Inside the apartment, two unlikely allies planned a war against a man who thought he was untouchable. Felix Levy had made 17 people disappear, but he never faced someone who knew how to make stories live forever. Chapter 4. The Hostages. Elisa Reynolds lived in a small apartment in Gresham, one of Portland's working-class suburbs. She was 31, but looked older, her face drawn from years of dialysis and the stress of single motherhood. When Wilson knocked on her door at 9 in the morning, little Mabel Pittman answered, a bright-eyed 4-year-old who squealed "Grandpa," and launched herself into Wilson's arms. Who's that? Mabel pointed at Clark. A friend, Wilson said. Is your mama home? Elisa appeared from the kitchen, and Clark saw the dialysis catheter port visible at her neck, the exhaustion in her eyes. She froze when she saw him. Wilson, no. You can't bring anyone here. If Dr. Reynolds finds out. Dr. Reynolds works for Felix Levy, Clark said gently, and Levy is using your illness to control your father-in-law. I'm here to help stop that. Elisa looked at Wilson. You told him. He saved my life last night, Elisa, and I almost got him killed. Wilson's voice broke. These past 6 months, the things I've done for Levy, driving people to places where bad things happened, I can't do it anymore. Clark's a documentary filmmaker. He's been investigating Levy. If we help him, maybe we can all get free. Free? Elisa laughed bitterly. I'm dying, Wilson. My kidneys are failing. The transplant list is 2 years long, but Dr. Reynolds said he could get me to the top in 3 months if I cooperated. If I convinced you to cooperate. She looked at Clark. I'm sorry for whatever you went through, but I have a 4-year-old daughter. I don't have the luxury of being brave. Clark understood that kind of fear, the parent's fear that eclipsed everything else. Can I show you something? He pulled out his laptop and played the recording from last night. Hatfield and Tara casually discussing his murder, Levy's threat against Elisa, the mention of 17 other victims. Elisa went pale. He killed people? 17 that we know of. Doctors, researchers, journalists, anyone who threatened his profits. And he's holding you hostage the same way he's controlled dozens of others. Clark paused. Dr. Reynolds, the one who promised you a transplant. His name is Dr. Jeremy Jones. I found him in my research. He lost his medical license in Connecticut 5 years ago for selling organs on the black market. Levy got him a new identity and set him up here. The transplant he's promising? It's not legal. It's not safe. And it's probably not real. What? Clark pulled up documents on his laptop. Newspaper articles about Jones's arrest, medical board records, a photo comparison showing Jones and Reynolds were the same person. Levy uses him to manipulate people. He promises miracles and delivers just enough hope to keep you compliant. But Jeremy Jones doesn't have access to legitimate transplant lists. He's a fraud. Elisa sank into a chair, her hand over her mouth. Oh my God. Oh my God. I convinced Wilson to work for a murderer because I thought. She looked at Mabel, playing with her toys in the corner. What do I do? You let me document your story, Clark said. You go on camera and tell the truth about how Levy is exploiting sick people. I'll protect your identity if you want, but I need your testimony to show his pattern of coercion. And then what? He'll just find another doctor to threaten me with. I'll still be dying. Maybe not. Clark pulled out his phone and showed her a message from Harriet Walter that had come through an hour ago. I have a source whose brother developed a revolutionary cancer treatment protocol. Dr. Marcus Harding. Levy had him killed, but his sister has all his research notes. Before he died, Marcus was also researching kidney regeneration techniques. If we can get his research to legitimate doctors, get real medical professionals to review it, that could take years, or it could save your life and dozens of others. But only if Levy doesn't bury it first. Clark met her eyes. I know you're scared. I know you just want to protect your daughter. But Levy is going to keep hurting people, keep killing people, unless someone stops him. Help me do that. Elisa looked at Wilson, then at Mabel, then back at Clark. If I do this, you have to promise me something. Whatever happens, even if I don't make it, you make sure Mabel is taken care of. Wilson will raise her, but she deserves a trust fund, college money, a future. Make Levy pay for that. I promise, Clark said. For the next 2 hours, he interviewed Elisa on camera. She told her story, how Levy's people had approached her 6 months after her diagnosis, how Dr. Jones had seemed like a miracle, how the threats had been subtle at first, but grew more explicit. She gave Clark names of other patients Jones had treated, people who disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. It was devastating testimony, and it was exactly what Clark needed. After finishing with Elisa, Clark and Wilson drove to Clark's storage unit in Beaverton. It was an anonymous facility, the kind of place that didn't ask questions as long as you paid in cash. Clark had rented it under the name Ted Holland, a pseudonym he'd used for receiving sensitive documents. Inside the climate-controlled unit was a fireproof safe containing hard drives with every scrap of evidence from the Levy investigation. Interviews with Harriet Walter, medical records linking suspicious deaths to Meridian Bio Capital, financial documents showing shell companies and bribes, footage of Levy's associates conducting what could only be described as corporate espionage. But the most damning evidence was on a drive labeled Phoenix Protocol. 6 months ago, Clark had interviewed a former Meridian researcher named Dr. Kirsten Fletcher who'd fled the country after witnessing something that terrified her. She'd agreed to a video conference from her hiding place in Vancouver, and what she'd told him was explosive. Felix doesn't just by promising drug research and bury it, Dr. Fletcher had said, her face hidden in shadows. He weaponizes it. The Phoenix Protocol is a drug therapy that can cure a dozen different cancers, pancreatic, lung, brain, all of them. But it's expensive to produce, and it would cannibalize Meridian's existing cancer drug sales. So Felix has been systematically eliminating anyone who knows about it while pretending to research it. Marcus Harding figured it out. That's why he died. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't live with it anymore. I've got copies of the research data, the clinical trial results, everything. It's on an encrypted drive. If something happens to me, I've arranged for it to be sent to you. She'd given him a long alphanumeric code. That's the decryption key. Use it when you're ready to blow this open. But be careful, Clark. Felix has eyes everywhere. The moment you go public with this, there's no going back. Dr. Fletcher had died 3 weeks later in a hiking accident in British Columbia. And 1 week after that, Clark had received an anonymous package containing an encrypted hard drive. He never decrypted it. He'd been waiting for the right moment, for when he had enough corroborating evidence to make the story bulletproof. He'd been trying to be careful, methodical, professional, and it had almost gotten him killed. Clark held the encrypted drive now, feeling its weight. This is it, he told Wilson. This is the evidence that ends Levy. Then why do you look worried? Because the moment we decrypt this and go public, Levy will know. And he'll come at us with everything he has. Clark looked at the older man. He'll go after Elisa. He'll go after Harriet. He'll go after everyone who's helped me. We need to be ready for that. Wilson nodded slowly. Then we'd better move fast. What's the plan? We give all of this to Charlie Copeland, the federal prosecutor. We make copies and send them to every journalist, medical board, and law enforcement agency we can think of. We make the information so public that Levy can't suppress it. Clark started loading hard drives into his bag, and we make sure that if anything happens to us, the story still gets told. They were loading the last of the equipment into Wilson's cab when Clark's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Clark Schaefer. The voice was smooth, South African accent unmistakable. Felix Levy, I was very disappointed to hear you didn't make your appointment last night. Clark's blood ran cold, but he kept his voice steady. How did you get this number? I own the telecommunications company that provides your cell service. Getting your new number after you abandoned your old phone took about 30 seconds. Levy sounded amused. You've been busy this morning, talking to Elisa Reynolds, visiting storage facilities. I'm impressed by your resourcefulness. He's tracking my phone. Clark mouthed to Wilson, who went pale. What do you want, Levy? To make you an offer. $5 million. You destroy all your research, sign an NDA, and disappear. You can go anywhere in the world, start a new life, make new documentaries about topics that don't concern me. All I ask is that you stop this foolish crusade against Meridian Biocapital. And if I refuse, then you're going to discover that I'm much more creative than you think. Your wife, Tara, for instance, she'll be heartbroken to learn about your death tomorrow. The police are about to discover evidence that you murdered Jimmy Byers and then killed yourself out of guilt. Very tragic. Unless, of course, the police find evidence that Tara was your accomplice. Then she goes to prison for life. Levy paused. Your choice, Mr. Schaefer. Protect yourself and let your wife pay for conspiring against you. Or take my money and everyone walks away clean. Clark's mind raced. Levy was offering him revenge, a way to punish Tara for her betrayal. And he was doing it now because he knew Clark was angry, hurt, most likely to make emotional decisions. But Clark had learned something in 10 years of documentary work. Revenge was a story with no heroes, only victims. I'm not interested in your money or your mind games, Clark said. And I'm not going to let my wife, even if she betrayed me, be framed for a murder she didn't commit. Here's my counteroffer. Surrender to federal authorities within 24 hours. Confess to all 17 murders. Release everyone you're holding hostage through medical coercion. And pray that the judge is more merciful than you've been. Levy laughed. You have spirit. I respect that. But you're making a terrible mistake. I've buried journalists before. I've buried federal prosecutors. I've buried people with evidence just as damning as whatever you think you have. What makes you think you'll be any different? Because I'm not doing this alone. And because you've finally picked a target who knows how to tell a story so good, so true, that it can't be silenced. Clark smiled. See you in court, Felix. He hung up. Wilson stared at him. Was that smart? Now he knows you're not backing down. He already knew. That call was about intimidation, not negotiation. Clark pulled the battery from his phone. And you're right. He's tracking us. We need to ditch our devices, get burner phones, and stay off the grid. From now on, we assume everything we do is being watched. As they drove away from the storage facility, Clark looked at the bag full of evidence beside him. Somewhere in Portland, Felix Levy was plotting his next move. Somewhere, Tara was probably receiving orders from Daniel Hatfield. Somewhere, 17 families mourned loved ones who'd been murdered for trying to do the right thing. But Clark had something Levy's other victims hadn't. He knew he was in a fight, and he'd spent the last decade learning how to win wars of information. The documentary filmmaker was about to become the story, and he was going to make sure it had the ending the victims deserved. Chapter 5, The Alliance. Charlie Copeland was a federal prosecutor who'd made his reputation going after white-collar crime. He was 42, black, and had the kind of focused intensity that came from growing up poor in Baltimore and fighting his way to a law degree from Georgetown. Clark had met him during the Silenced Voices investigation when Charlie had used Clark's documentary evidence to build a federal case against the trafficking ring. They met at a diner in Salem, far enough from Portland that Levy's surveillance network would have trouble tracking them. Charlie arrived with a woman Clark didn't recognize, sharp-eyed, Asian, early 30s, with the bearing of someone who'd seen combat. "This is FBI Special Agent Ramona Banks," Charlie said. "She's with the Organized Crime Division. After you called, I reached out to some contacts. Turns out the Bureau has been trying to build a case against Meridian Biocapital for 3 years." Ramona nodded to Clark and Wilson. 4 agents worked that investigation. 3 were reassigned after political pressure from above. The 4th, my partner, was killed in what the official report calls a random mugging. Her voice was hard. "I know Felix Levy is a murderer. I just haven't been able to prove it." "Charlie says you can." Clark opened his laptop and spent the next 90 minutes walking them through everything. The recordings of Hatfield and Tara, Elisa's testimony, Dr. Fletcher's encrypted drive, 8 months of investigative footage showing the pattern of suspicious deaths around Meridian. Charlie took notes, his expression growing darker. "This is RICO territory. Pattern of racketeering, murder for hire, medical fraud, witness intimidation. If we can decrypt that drive and verify its contents." "We can." Leon Huyn's voice came through Clark's encrypted chat. Clark had set up a video call so Leon could participate remotely from his secure location. "I've been analyzing the encryption. It's military grade, but Dr. Fletcher gave Clark the key. The issue is that the drive has a fail-safe, 3 wrong decryption attempts, and it wipes itself. We only get 1 shot. Then we make it count," Ramona said. "But here's the problem. Even with all this evidence, Levy has resources we can't match. He's got connections in state and federal government, the ability to intimidate witnesses, enough lawyers to tie this up in court for years. We need something that forces his hand, makes him unable to hide." Clark had been thinking about this all morning. "We go public. Everything at once. I have contacts at the New York Times, the Washington Post, 60 Minutes. We give them the story, the evidence, everything. We make it so big that Levy can't suppress it." "That could backfire," Charlie warned. "If he knows we're about to drop the story, he might flee the country. Or worse, he might start eliminating witnesses and evidence." "He's already trying to eliminate me," Clark pointed out, "and everyone connected to me. The only way to protect people is to make the information public, so there's no point in killing us." Ramona leaned back. "There's another angle we should consider. Levy's power comes from controlling the narrative around his company. He's positioned Meridian as a responsible pharmaceutical leader, himself as a philanthropist and job creator. What if we destroy that image first? Make him so toxic that his political allies abandon him?" "How?" Wilson asked. "We stage a press conference," Ramona said. "We announce a federal investigation into Meridian Biocapital. We don't reveal all our evidence yet, just enough to make the story real. The media will go wild. Levy's stock price will crash. His board will panic. And in that chaos, he'll make mistakes." Clark considered this. It was risky. They'd be revealing their hand before they were completely ready. But Ramona was right that they needed to control the narrative. "We'd need ironclad protection for witnesses. Elisa, Harriet, Wilson, they're all vulnerable." "Witness protection," Charlie said. "I can arrange that. And I could get a judge to sign emergency protective orders." He looked at Ramona. "You really think the Bureau will back this?" "I think my bosses will have no choice once it's public. They can't be seen protecting a serial killer, even a rich one." Ramona smiled grimly. "And I've got enough dirt on the people who shut down the last investigation that they'll cooperate if they know what's good for them." For the next several hours, they planned. Leon would decrypt Dr. Fletcher's drive and verify its contents. Harriet would provide medical expert testimony about her brother's research. Wilson and Elisa would give victim impact statements. Charlie would coordinate with law enforcement. Ramona would handle media strategy and witness protection. And Clark would do what he did best: turn 8 months of investigation into a compelling, undeniable narrative that would make Felix Levy's crimes impossible to ignore. "When do we go public?" Clark asked. 48 hours, Charlie decided. That gives us time to secure the witnesses, decrypt the drive, and coordinate with media outlets. We announced the investigation on Friday afternoon, prime time for evening news cycles. By Monday, Levy will be the most hated man in America. As the meeting broke up, Ramona pulled Clark aside. I need to tell you something about your wife. Clark tensed. What about her? After Charlie told me about your case, I ran a background check. Tara Nelson, before she was Tara Schaefer, worked for a pharmaceutical marketing firm called Innovex Communications. Want to guess who their biggest client was? Meridian Biocapital. She started working there 8 years ago. Quit 6 months before she met you. Ramona's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry, Clark, but I think your entire marriage might have been a setup. Levy probably planted her in your life after your first documentary started making waves. The revelation hit Clark like a physical blow. 6 years. Their entire relationship, from their chance meeting at a film festival to their wedding to every moment of false intimacy. All of it orchestrated by Felix Levy. Why? His voice came out strangled. Why go to that much trouble? Because you're dangerous, Ramona said. Documentary filmmakers have ended political careers, exposed corporate fraud, changed laws. Levy's smart enough to know that. So he did what predators do. He got close to his prey, married you off to one of his operatives, so he'd always know what you were working on. And when you finally started investigating him, he had someone in your bed ready to sabotage you. Clark thought about every intimate moment, every conversation, every time Tara had encouraged him to share details about his work. How many sources had he exposed? How many leads had he given away? Does she love him? Hatfield. Ramona shrugged. Probably not. People like Tara, trained operatives, they don't form real attachments. It's all transactional. She was doing a job. Somehow that was worse. At least if Tara had fallen in love with someone else, it would have been human. This was just cold manipulation. I need you to promise me something, Clark said. When this goes public and Levy goes down, I want Tara charged as an accessory to conspiracy to commit murder. I want her to face what she's done. Done, Ramona said. She'll go to prison right alongside her boss. That night, hiding in Robert Castaneda's apartment, Clark finally let himself feel the full weight of betrayal. He'd lost his wife, his home, his sense of safety. But he'd gained something too, a clarity of purpose he'd never had before. Felix Levy had taken everything from him. Now Clark was going to return the favor. Chapter 6, The Trap. The decryption happened at 2 a.m. on Thursday morning. Leon had spent 18 hours working on the fail-safes, running simulations, triple-checking the encryption key Dr. Fletcher had provided. When he finally entered the code and the drive unlocked, everyone watching via encrypted video held their breath. Then Leon's face appeared on screen, pale and stunned. Oh my God, guys, this is... What? Clark demanded. What's on it? Everything. Leon's hands were shaking. Clinical trial data showing the Phoenix protocol cured 94% of advanced cancer patients. Email chains of Levy ordering the research suppressed. Financial records showing he paid off FDA officials to slow approval of competing drugs. Video recordings of him literally ordering Dr. Harding's murder. He's on camera, Clark. He's on camera, say make it look like a suicide. The room erupted. Charlie was already on the phone with his boss. Ramona was pulling up contact lists for every media outlet in the country. Harriet started crying. Relief and rage mixed together. Clark felt a strange calm settle over him. This was it. This was the smoking gun that would end Felix Levy. Make copies, he ordered Leon. Encrypt them and send them to 15 different locations. Cloud storage, physical drives, everything. I want this information backed up so thoroughly that Levy couldn't destroy it if he nuked the entire internet. Already on it, Leon said. But Clark, there's something else. The drive has GPS metadata embedded in the video files. We can prove exactly where each piece of evidence was recorded. Which means we can connect Levy directly to crime scenes, Ramona finished. This is prosecutorial gold. They spent the next 6 hours organizing the evidence into a presentation that would be devastating. Charlie contacted every federal agency with jurisdiction, FBI, DEA, FDA, DOJ. Ramona arranged for witness protection teams to secure Elisa, Harriet, and Wilson. Clark edited together a 20-minute documentary that would premiere during the press conference, a greatest hits compilation of Levy's crimes. By Thursday afternoon, they were ready. The press conference was scheduled for Friday at 3 p.m. at the federal courthouse in downtown Portland. Every major media outlet had been tipped that there would be major revelations about a prominent pharmaceutical company. The courthouse steps would be packed with cameras. Felix Levy would have no warning until it was too late. Except that's not how it happened. Thursday at 6 p.m., Clark's burner phone rang. Unknown number again. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Schaefer. Felix Levy sounded genuinely impressed. I have to hand it to you. You've been more resourceful than I expected. The federal investigation, the witness protection, the press conference tomorrow. Very clever. Clark's blood ran cold. Ow! Please. You think I don't have sources in law enforcement? In the media? In the federal courthouse? Levy laughed. I've known about your plans for 12 hours. I just wanted to see how far you take it. Then you know you're finished. Am I? Because here's what I know. Right now, there's a tactical team approaching Robert Castaneda's apartment where you're hiding. There's another team approaching Elisa Reynolds' home. A third team is at Harriet Walters' hotel. And I have Daniel Hatfield standing outside the office where your prosecutor friend Charlie Copeland is currently working late. Clark looked out the window. 3 black SUVs were pulling up to the building. You have a choice, Levy continued. Call off the press conference, destroy all your evidence, and walk away. Or I kill everyone you care about, starting with Elisa and her daughter. I'll make you watch via video chat. Then Harriet, then Wilson, then Charlie and Agent Banks. And finally, if you're still stubborn, I'll have Tara killed too. Messily, you're bluffing. But Clark's voice shook. Am I? Look out your window. The man getting out of the lead SUV is Frank Palmer. He's former Delta Force, now a private contractor I employ for special projects. He's killed 14 people for me, Mr. Schaefer. He's very good at it. And right now, he has orders to come up to that apartment and beat you to death unless you call me in the next 60 seconds and agree to my terms. Clark watched Frank Palmer enter the building. The man was massive, moving with the casual confidence of someone who'd killed before and would kill again. His mind raced. Everything they'd built, all the evidence, the federal case, it was all about to collapse if Levy made good on his threats. But if he surrendered now, if he let Levy win, 17 murdered people would never see justice. Elisa would die waiting for a transplant that would never come. Harriet would spend the rest of her life knowing her brother's killer walked free. And Felix Levy would kill again. 30 seconds, Levy said. Clark made a decision. I need to know something first. Why did you do it? Why kill Marcus Harding? Why suppress a cure for cancer? You're already rich beyond measure. Why kill people for more money you don't need? Levy was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its amusement. You really don't understand, do you? It's not about money. It's about control. Every cure I suppress, every researcher I eliminate, every patient I deny treatment, it's proof that I can. That I'm smarter than them, more powerful, untouchable. Do you know how many people have tried to stop me? Journalists, prosecutors, politicians, even other pharmaceutical executives. All of them failed. All of them learned that Felix Levy does what he wants, and no one can stop him. Sounds lonely, Clark said. Being the smartest predator in a cage you built yourself. 15 seconds. Here's the thing about documentary filmmakers, Clark said, his voice steady now. We're really good at recording conversations. Like this one, which has been broadcasting live to Charlie Copeland, Agent Banks, Leon Huynh, and about a dozen federal agents who are right now triangulating your location based on your cell signal. Say hi to the prosecution, Felix. There was a long, frozen silence. You're lying, Levy said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Am I? Check your stock price. It started crashing about 5 minutes ago when Leon leaked some of the Phoenix Protocol evidence to Wall Street analysts. Check the news. Charlie just released a statement announcing a federal investigation into Meridian Biocapital. Check your phone. I bet you've got a lot of panic calls from board members. Clark could hear chaos in the background of Levy's call now. Shouting voices, ringing phones, and Frank Palmer. Clark continued, the man you sent to kill me? Ramona Banks is currently arresting him in the lobby. Turns out, when you threaten federal witnesses, the FBI takes it personally. Your team, at Elise's apartment, also being arrested. Same with the guys at Harriet's hotel and outside Charlie's office. This isn't over, Levy hissed. I have lawyers, resources, connections. You have nothing, Clark interrupted, because while you were busy threatening us, we were busy turning you into the most hated man in America. The press conference is still happening tomorrow, Felix. The only difference is now we get to include a recording of you confessing to murder and threatening to kill a 4-year-old child. How do you think that's going to play? He hung up. For a moment, Clark just stood there, shaking with adrenaline. Then Charlie called. Did you get everything? Clark asked. Every word. He just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder, witness tampering, and about 6 other felonies. And we traced the call. He's at his estate in the West Hills. FBI is moving in now. It worked, Clark said, hardly believing it. The plan actually worked. Your plan, Ramona said, her voice joining the call, letting him think he'd won, drawing out his confession. That was brilliant. Insane, but brilliant. Wilson emerged from the bedroom where he'd been watching everything unfold. Is Elisa safe? She's safe, Ramona confirmed. All the witnesses are secure. And Frank Palmer is in custody. He's already trying to cut a deal. Clark sank into a chair, the weight of the last 48 hours finally hitting him. They'd done it. They'd actually beaten Felix Levy at his own game. But as he looked at the evidence spread across Robert Castaneda's apartment, the hard drives full of death, the testimony of destroyed lives, the years of suffering that could have been prevented, Clark felt no triumph. Only exhaustion and a bone-deep sadness. Tomorrow's press conference, he said, I want to do something different. I don't want it to be about Levy's downfall. I want it to be about the victims. Marcus Harding and the 16 others. I want their families to speak. I want Elisa to tell her story. I want people to understand what was taken from us. Agreed, Charlie said. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. Outside, the Portland night settled into its usual rain. Somewhere across town, FBI agents were arresting one of the most powerful men in the pharmaceutical industry. Tomorrow, the world would know the truth. But tonight, in a dead soldier's apartment, Clark Schaefer allowed himself a moment of quiet victory. Felix Levy had made one fatal mistake. He'd underestimated the power of a good story, well told. And now the whole world was about to hear it. Chapter 7. The Trial of Truth. The press conference on Friday afternoon became a media firestorm. Charlie Copeland stood at the podium flanked by Ramona Banks and the director of the FBI Portland Field Office, announcing a 47-count federal indictment against Felix Levy, Daniel Hatfield, Dr. Jeremy Jones, and 12 other Meridian BioCapital executives. But the moment that defined the day came when Harriet Walter stepped up to the microphone. My brother Marcus didn't commit suicide, she said, her voice breaking. He was murdered because he discovered a cure for cancer that threatened someone's profit margin. 12 patients who should be alive today are dead because Felix Levy cared more about money than human life. I'm here today not just for Marcus, but for all the families who've lost someone to cancer that could have been prevented. The Phoenix Protocol works. The research is real. And now, finally, it's going to see the light of day. The medical community exploded. Within hours, oncologists worldwide were analyzing Dr. Fletcher's research data. The FDA announced an emergency review of the Phoenix Protocol. Major cancer research hospitals demanded access to the clinical trial results. Felix Levy's empire crumbled in real time. Meridian BioCapital stock crashed 89% in a single day. The board fired Levy and installed an interim CEO who immediately pledged cooperation with federal investigators. 3 of Levy's political allies, 2 senators and a congressman, hastily returned his campaign contributions and deleted photos of themselves at his charity galas. But Levy himself refused to go quietly. His lawyers, a team of 15 led by one of the country's most notorious defense attorneys, immediately began a media campaign painting Clark as an obsessed conspiracy theorist. They claimed the recordings were fabricated, that Dr. Fletcher's drive had been tampered with, that this was all a vendetta by a jealous documentarian whose work had been rejected. And they went after Tara. Mrs. Schaefer is a victim in this, Levy's lead attorney told CNN. Her husband became increasingly paranoid and unstable during his so-called investigation. She feared for her safety. When she confided in Mr. Hatfield, a family friend and attorney, it was because she needed legal advice about protecting herself from her husband's erratic behavior. Clark watched the interview from Charlie's office, his hands clenched. Tara appeared on screen, perfectly dressed in morning colors, tears streaming down her face. "I love my husband," she said, her voice trembling. "I supported his work, even when it consumed him. But when he started talking about Felix Levy having him killed, about vast conspiracies, I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. Daniel was just trying to help me figure out if Clark needed psychiatric intervention. It was a masterful performance. If Clark hadn't recorded the actual conversation where she'd casually discussed his murder, he might have believed her himself." "That's bold," Ramona said, watching beside him, flipping the narrative to make herself the victim. "Will it work?" Clark asked. "With some people, maybe, but we got her on tape." Ramona pulled up the recording. "The jury is going to hear her say, 'How long do I have to play grieving?' And the life insurance will clear $500,000 like we planned. There's no defense for that. When does her trial start?" 3 months after Levy's. Charlie wants to prosecute him first, get a conviction, then use that to leverage guilty pleas from the secondary defendants. Ramona paused. "Are you going to be okay testifying against your own wife?" Clark thought about 6 years of marriage. 6 years of intimacy with someone who'd been running a con the entire time. 6 years of his life stolen by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a surveillance target. "She's not my wife," he said flatly. "She never was. That person didn't exist." The federal trial of Felix Levy began on a cold January morning, 3 months after his arrest. The courthouse in downtown Portland had never seen this kind of security, metal detectors, bomb-sniffing dogs, federal marshals everywhere. The judge had received death threats. Several jurors had to be dismissed after investigators found evidence of attempted bribery. Levy entered the courtroom in an expensive suit, looking thinner but defiant. He stared directly at Clark, who sat in the front row of the gallery. No fear in those eyes, just calculation. Charlie Copeland's opening statement was devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen, for the next 6 weeks, you're going to hear about 17 murders. 17 human beings who died because they threatened the profits of one man, Felix Levy. You're going to hear recorded confessions. You're going to see documentary evidence of a criminal conspiracy spanning 5 years in multiple states. You're going to meet families who lost loved ones. And you're going to learn about a cure for cancer that could have saved thousands of lives but was deliberately suppressed." He pointed at Levy. That man decided he was above the law. He decided human life was negotiable. He decided that his wealth and power made him untouchable. Your job, as jurors, is to prove him wrong. The prosecution's case was airtight. Charlie methodically walked the jury through each victim, each murder, each piece of evidence. Leon Huynh testified about the digital forensics linking Levy to the corruption of Clark's files. Nicholas Lucas testified about the pattern of deaths surrounding anyone who threatened Meridian. Harriet Walter testified about her brother's final days and the research that got him killed. But the moment that changed everything came in week 3, when Elisa Reynolds took the stand. She was thin, exhausted from dialysis, but her voice was steady as she told her story. How Levy's people had approached her. How they'd used her daughter as leverage. How Dr. Jeremy Jones had promised miracles that never materialized. "Did you believe you were going to die if you didn't cooperate?" Charlie asked. "Yes, and I believe my daughter would grow up without a mother." Elisa looked at Levy. He knew that. He counted on it. He used my love for Mabel the way a terrorist uses a bomb, as a weapon to control me. Levy's attorney tried to break her on cross-examination, suggesting she was lying for attention or money. But Elisa didn't crack. "I don't want money," she said quietly. "I want my daughter to grow up in a world where men like Felix Levy can't use sick people as pawns, where doctors can cure diseases without being murdered, where the truth matters more than profits." When she finished, 3 jurors were crying. Clark testified on day 18. He walked the jury through his 8-month investigation, showing them clips from his documentary, explaining how each piece of evidence connected. He played the recording of Hatfield and Tara planning his murder. He played the recording of Levy confessing and threatening to kill Elisa's daughter. Levy's attorney tried to paint him as obsessed, as someone who'd fabricated evidence to make a sensational documentary. Mr. Schaefer, isn't it true that your marriage was failing and you blamed Mr. Levy for your personal problems? No, Clark said calmly. My marriage failed because my wife was a corporate spy sent to sabotage my work, which is documented in approximately 40 hours of surveillance footage showing her meeting with Meridian executives over the past 6 years. You recorded your own wife. I record everything. It's what documentary filmmakers do. Clark looked at the jury, and I'm grateful I did, because otherwise Felix Levy would have successfully framed me for murder and been free to kill again. The prosecution rested after 5 weeks. Levy's defense took 2 days. They had no witnesses, no evidence, no credible alternative narrative. Just attacks on the prosecution's character and desperate attempts to create reasonable doubt where none existed. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Dr. Marcus Harding, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Dr. Kirsten Fletcher, how do you find? Guilty. 17 times, the foreman read the same word. Guilty. Felix Levy showed no emotion as he was convicted of every count. But Clark, watching from the gallery, saw something flicker in the man's eyes. Not remorse, just the stunned realization that he'd finally lost. The sentencing hearing came 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed with families of Levy's victims, medical professionals whose careers he'd destroyed, patients who'd been denied life-saving treatments because of his greed. Judge Patricia Ramsey had a reputation as a tough sentencer, but even she seemed shaken by the scope of Levy's crimes. Mr. Levy, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a more callous disregard for human life, she said. You didn't kill out of passion or desperation. You killed methodically, repeatedly, for money you didn't need. You destroyed families. You suppressed medical research that could have saved thousands of lives. You corrupted our healthcare system and our justice system. And when given multiple opportunities to confess or show remorse, you instead threatened more violence. She looked down at him. The prosecution has recommended multiple consecutive life sentences without parole. I'm going to exceed that recommendation. On each of the 17 murder conspiracy counts, I sentence you to life without parole to be served consecutively. That's a minimum of 340 years in federal prison. You will die in prison, Mr. Levy, and the world will be safer for it. As marshals led Levy away, he looked back at Clark one final time. No threats, no defiance, just acknowledgement. One predator recognizing another predator who'd proven more skilled. But Clark Schaefer wasn't a predator. He was a storyteller, and he just told the story that ended a monster. Chapter 8, The Aftermath. Tara Schaefer's trial began 3 months later. It was almost anticlimactic after Levy's conviction. Her attorney tried to argue she'd been coerced, manipulated, that she was another of Levy's victims. But the recordings were damning, and Ramona had uncovered evidence of Tara receiving payments from Meridian going back 7 years. The jury convicted her of conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. She received 25 years in federal prison. Clark attended every day of her trial, but never testified. Charlie didn't need him. The evidence spoke for itself. On the final day, as Tara was led away in handcuffs, she looked at Clark. I'm sorry, she mouthed. Clark said nothing. Just watched her disappear through the doors. He'd loved a person who never existed. There was nothing to forgive because Tara, the real Tara, whoever that was, had never been his wife. Just an actress playing a role. He felt nothing. No satisfaction. No sadness. Just emptiness where 6 years of his life used to be. Daniel Hatfield took a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for testifying against other Meridian executives. Dr. Jeremy Jones got life in prison for his role in multiple patient deaths. Frank Palmer, the enforcer, cooperated fully and received 30 years. In total, 23 people connected to Levy's conspiracy were convicted or pleaded guilty. Meridian Biocapital was dissolved, its assets sold to pay restitution to victims' families. The Phoenix Protocol was released to medical researchers worldwide, and clinical trials began immediately. 6 months after Levy's conviction, the first new patients achieved remission using Marcus Harding's cancer treatment. Harriet Walter stood with Clark at the hospital where the trials were taking place, watching through a window as doctors celebrated the results. Marcus would be proud, she said quietly, not just of the cure working, but of you, of what you did to make this possible. Clark had finished his documentary, The Phoenix Protocol, How One Man Tried to Kill Hope, and it premiered at Sundance to a standing ovation. Netflix bought distribution rights for 7 figures. The documentary won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. But Clark felt no triumph, just exhaustion. Wilson Pittman retired from driving cabs. With the reward money from the federal prosecution, 30% of Levy's seized assets, divided among those who'd helped bring him down. He bought a small house in Portland where Elisa and Mabel could live comfortably. Elisa received an experimental kidney transplant using techniques derived from Marcus Harding's research. 6 months later, she was in remission, her kidneys functioning normally. "You saved my life," she told Clark when they met for coffee 9 months after Levy's conviction. "You saved Mabel's mother." "I just told the truth," Clark said. "You did more than that. You cared about us. About all of us." Elisa squeezed his hand. "What are you going to do now?" Clark had been asking himself that question for months. His marriage was over, annulled, since it had been based on fraud. His house had been sold. His old life was gone. But he was still a documentarian, still a storyteller. "There's a case in Seattle," he said slowly. "A tech company accused of using AI to manipulate elections. The whistleblower is terrified, says the people involved are dangerous. No journalist will touch it." Elisa smiled. "Of course you're going after them. Someone has to tell the story. Just promise me you'll be careful. And maybe don't get married to any corporate spies this time." Clark laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd had in almost a year. "I'll try." Chapter 9. The Phoenix. 1 year after Felix Levy's conviction, Clark Schaefer stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., testifying before a congressional committee investigating pharmaceutical industry practices. Beside him were Harriet Walter, now a patient advocate working to reform drug pricing, Wilson Pittman, who became a spokesman for victims of medical coercion, and Elisa Reynolds, healthy and vibrant, her daughter, Mabel, playing quietly in the gallery. "The pharmaceutical industry saves lives," Clark told the assembled senators and representatives. "But it also has the power to destroy them." Felix Levy wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom of a system that values profits over patients, that allows corporations to suppress research if it threatens quarterly earnings, that treats human life as a commodity. He pulled up a presentation. "Since Levy's conviction, we've identified 12 other cases where promising medical research was suppressed or researchers were intimidated. The Phoenix Protocol wasn't unique. It was just the one we managed to expose." The committee chair leaned forward. "Mr. Schaefer, you're saying there are other cures being hidden?" "I'm saying there's a systemic problem that needs systemic solutions. Mandatory disclosure of clinical trial data. Protection for medical whistleblowers. Criminal penalties for executives who suppress life-saving research. If we don't fix this, there will be another Felix Levy, and more people will die." The hearing lasted 6 hours. By the end, 3 senators had committed to sponsoring legislation that would become known as Marcus's Law, sweeping pharmaceutical reform that made it a federal crime to suppress medical research that showed promise in treating life-threatening diseases. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough to undo the harm Levy had caused, the 17 lives he'd taken, the thousands of patients who died because the Phoenix Protocol had been suppressed for 5 years. But it was something. That evening, Clark met with the Seattle whistleblower who'd contacted him about the AI election manipulation case. Her name was Marie Winter, and she was terrified, just like Harriet had been, just like Elisa had been. "I don't know if I can do this," Marie said, her hands shaking. "These people, the things they're capable of." "I know," Clark said gently. "I know you're scared. But here's what I've learned. The people who do terrible things, who abuse power and hurt innocent people, they rely on silence. They rely on fear. The moment you speak up, the moment you tell the truth, you take away their power. What if they come after me? Then I'll document it. I'll make sure the world knows. I'll make sure your story is told. Clark met her eyes. I can't promise you'll be safe. I can't promise there won't be consequences. But I can promise that if you have the courage to speak up, you won't face it alone. Marie thought about this for a long time. Then she nodded. Okay, let's do it. Let's tell the story. As Clark began his new investigation, he thought about the past year. He'd lost a wife who'd never really been his wife. He'd lost his home, his sense of safety, his naive belief that doing the right thing would always lead to a happy ending. But he gained something too. He learned that ordinary people, cab drivers and grieving sisters and single mothers, could stand up to monsters and win. He'd learned that the truth, properly documented and courageously told, was more powerful than any conspiracy. He'd learned that justice wasn't a destination, but a continuous fight, one that required vigilance and courage and the willingness to keep telling stories that needed to be told. Felix Levy was in prison. Tara was in prison. The Phoenix Protocol was saving lives. Elisa was healthy. Harriet had found purpose in her grief. Wilson had his family back. The good guys had won this round. But there were always more stories to tell, more wrongs to expose, more battles to fight. Clark Schaefer opened his laptop and began typing the first interview questions for Marie Winter. A documentary filmmaker's work was never done. But that was okay, because neither was the truth. Epilogue. 3 years later, Clark's documentary about the AI election manipulation case, Democracy.exe, How Technology Hijacked Our Vote, would win his second Academy Award. The investigation would lead to the imprisonment of 6 tech executives and sweeping legislation regulating AI in elections. 5 years later, the Phoenix Protocol would be responsible for saving over 50,000 lives, with a 91% cure rate for previously terminal cancers. 7 years later, Marcus's law would be credited with preventing the suppression of 4 major medical breakthroughs, including treatments for Alzheimer's and ALS. Felix Levy died in federal prison at age 68, having served 7 years of his 340-year sentence. No one attended his funeral. Tara Schaefer was released after serving 18 years of her sentence. She moved to a small town in Oregon under her maiden name. She never contacted Clark again. Elisa Reynolds and Mabel Pittman thrived. Mabel grew up to become a medical researcher, inspired by the man she'd never met, Dr. Marcus Harding, whose research had saved her mother's life. Wilson Pittman lived to see his great-grandchildren, secure in the knowledge that his one moment of courage had changed the world. And Clark Schaefer kept making documentaries. Some exposed corruption, some celebrated heroes, some told stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But every single one told the truth. Because in the end, that was all that mattered. The truth, well told, at the right time, to the people who needed to hear it. That was how you changed the world. One story at a time. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Ashes and Papers. The October wind cut through the cemetery like a blade, sending dead leaves dancing across the weathered headstones. Gregory Montoya stood motionless before his mother's fresh grave, his calloused hands clasped behind his back in military fashion. The simple black suit he wore was his only good one, bought secondhand 3 years ago for job interviews that never led anywhere. Dolores Montoya's headstone was modest granite, nothing fancy. Just like everything else in Gregory's life had become since returning from overseas. The inscription read simply, "Beloved Mother, 1952 to 2024. She gave everything for her boys. Still playing the grieving son, I see." Gregory didn't turn around. He recognized Samantha's voice, his wife of 8 years, though that title felt increasingly meaningless. Her heels clicked against the paved path as she approached, each step deliberate and cold. "She's barely in the ground, Sam," Gregory said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of exhaustion that had become his constant companion. "Oh, spare me the sentiment," Samantha snapped, moving to stand beside him. Even at a funeral, she looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Perfect blonde hair, designer black dress that probably cost more than Gregory made in 2 months at the warehouse. "Your mother never liked me anyway." Gregory finally turned to look at his wife. At 32, Samantha was still beautiful, but there was something different now. A hardness in her green eyes that hadn't been there when they first met. Or maybe it had been, and he'd been too blinded by love to see it. "She thought you married beneath yourself," Gregory said. Turned out she was right. Samantha's laugh was bitter. "Beneath myself?" "Gregory, look around. Look at this pathetic little funeral. 12 people showed up. 12. Your mother died with nothing, and you're well on your way to the same fate." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. "Which is why I'm doing us both a favor." Gregory stared at the envelope, understanding flooding through him like ice water. "Here? Now." "Divorce papers," Samantha confirmed, her voice gaining strength. "I want everything, Gregory. The house, the car, what little savings we have left. You're a worthless soldier who can't even hold down a decent job. I'm done playing house with a loser." The words hung in the air between them. Around the cemetery, the few remaining mourners were beginning to drift away. His younger brother Tyler had already left, probably heading back to his construction job. Gregory's old Army buddy Dave Jones lingered near the parking lot, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to abandon his friend. 8 years, Gregory said softly. 8 years of marriage, and this is where you choose to end it. "This is where it ended itself," Samantha replied. "I've been patient long enough. You had your chance to make something of yourself, and you failed. Some of us want more out of life than scraping by paycheck to paycheck." Gregory took the envelope but didn't open it. "And I suppose you found someone who can give you more?" For just a moment, Samantha's composure cracked. A flush of guilt crossed her features before she recovered. "This isn't about anyone else. This is about us. About how we don't work anymore." But Gregory had seen that look before, in the faces of enemy soldiers when they knew they'd been caught in a lie. Samantha was many things, but she'd never been a good liar. Not to someone who'd spent years learning to read people's tells in life-or-death situations. "I see," Gregory said simply, finally giving up. Samantha's voice carried a note of triumph. "Good. Sign the papers, Gregory. Make this easy on both of us." Gregory reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a smaller envelope, cream-colored and expensive-looking. "Before I do anything, I have something for you." "What is it?" "Your inheritance," Gregory said, holding out the envelope. Samantha frowned, suspicious. "Inheritance? From who?" "Your mother had nothing. Just open it." Samantha snatched the envelope and tore it open roughly. Inside were several documents, legal papers with official seals and letterheads. Gregory watched her face as she read, noting the exact moment confusion turned to shock. "Where did you?" she began, then stopped, her face going pale. "Keep reading," Gregory said calmly. Samantha's hands were shaking now as she turned to the second page. Whatever she saw there made her legs give out, and she collapsed to her knees on the damp grass beside his mother's grave, the papers scattering in the wind. "Who are you?" she whispered, staring up at him with wide, terrified eyes. For the first time in months, Gregory smiled. But it wasn't the warm, gentle smile Samantha remembered from their early days. This was something else entirely, cold and predatory. "Keep reading," he repeated. "You wanted everything, Sam. Now you're going to find out exactly what everything means." Chapter 2. The Making of a Soldier. 3 years earlier, Gregory Montoya had been many things in his 35 years. Son, soldier, husband, and guardian of secrets that could topple governments. What he had never been was ordinary, despite what his current circumstances suggested. Born to Dolores Montoya, a single mother who cleaned office buildings to support her 2 sons, Gregory learned early that survival required both strength and intelligence. While other kids in their rough Phoenix neighborhood were getting into gangs or drugs, Gregory spent his afternoons in the public library, devouring books on military strategy, business, and psychology. "You're different from the other boys," his mother would tell him, watching him study at their tiny kitchen table. "You see things others don't." At 18, Gregory enlisted in the Army, drawn to the Special Forces. The physical requirements were brutal, but they were nothing compared to the mental challenges. Gregory excelled at both. He could read micro-expressions, detect lies, and manipulate people's emotions with surgical precision. His commanding officers noticed. "Montoya has a gift," Colonel Patricia Hayes wrote in his evaluation. "He can become whoever he needs to be. The enemy never sees him coming." For 12 years, Gregory served in classified operations across 3 continents. Officially, he was a communications specialist. Unofficially, he was part of an elite psychological operations unit that specialized in infiltration and intelligence gathering. He learned to speak 4 languages fluently, to forge documents, to create false identities so convincing that even he sometimes forgot who he really was. The work was dangerous, but it was also lucrative. While his military salary was modest, Gregory invested every penny in legitimate business ventures, using the intelligence he gathered to make strategic decisions. A mining operation in Afghanistan, tech startups in Silicon Valley, real estate in emerging markets. Within 5 years, his portfolio was worth millions. But Gregory kept his wealth hidden, even from the military's financial disclosure requirements. He'd learned that money changed people, and he wanted to know who could be trusted when they thought he had nothing to offer. That philosophy was tested when he met Samantha Melton at a veteran support group in 2016. She was volunteering there, beautiful and compassionate, helping wounded warriors readjust to civilian life. Gregory was immediately drawn to her apparent empathy and kindness. "You seem different from the others," Samantha had said during their first conversation. "Calmer, more focused." Gregory had just finished his military service and was carefully constructing his civilian identity. To the world, he was a struggling veteran with PTSD, working warehouse jobs, and fighting with the VA for benefits. It was a perfect cover. No one suspected that the quiet man in secondhand clothes was worth more than most Fortune 500 executives. Their courtship was swift. Samantha seemed genuinely caring, bringing him home-cooked meals when he pretended to struggle financially, encouraging him to apply for better jobs, never complaining when he said he couldn't afford fancy restaurants or expensive gifts. "I don't care about money," she'd insisted when he proposed with a modest ring. "I care about you." They married in a small ceremony at his mother's church. Gregory's military buddy Dave Jones was his best man, one of the few people who knew at least part of the truth about Gregory's capabilities, if not his wealth. "You sure about this, brother?" Dave had asked the night before the wedding. "Something about her feels calculated." "Everyone's calculating," Gregory had replied. "The question is what they're calculating for." For the first few years, Samantha seemed content. She worked as a medical receptionist while Gregory maintained his cover, taking jobs at warehouses and loading docks. He deposited his modest paychecks into their joint account, while his real wealth accumulated in hidden offshore accounts and shell corporations. But as time passed, Gregory began to notice changes. Samantha grew more critical of their lifestyle, more resentful of their financial limitations. She started working late more often, claiming extra shifts at the medical clinic. She became secretive about her phone, protective of her computer. Gregory's training kicked in. He began surveillance, not the high-tech government variety, but simple observation. Samantha was having an affair with Dr. Brad Mullen, one of the physicians at her clinic. Mullen was everything Gregory appeared not to be: wealthy, successful, driving a BMW, and living in a mansion in Scottsdale. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound Gregory had received in combat. Not because he loved Samantha. He realized now that what he'd felt was more projection than genuine emotion, but because she had proven his worst suspicions about human nature. Given the choice between loyalty to a struggling veteran and the easy wealth of a successful doctor, she chose wealth. Gregory could have confronted her immediately, could have revealed his true financial status, and fought for the marriage. Instead, he chose to wait and watch. If Samantha was capable of this level of deception, he wanted to know exactly how far she would go. The answer came at his mother's funeral, in the form of divorce papers served at graveside. Samantha wasn't just leaving him. She was kicking him while he was down, trying to take even the little he appeared to have. That was when Gregory Montoya, the man who had toppled terrorist networks and dismantled criminal organizations, decided to remind the world why his enemies had learned to fear him. The soldier was done playing the victim. Chapter 3. The Art of War. Present day, 1 week after the funeral. The warehouse where Gregory worked his cover job was a monument to mediocrity. Gray concrete walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and a perpetual smell of diesel exhaust from the loading docks. For 3 years, Gregory had punched a time clock here, lifted boxes, and endured the subtle condescension of supervisors half his age. It was perfect camouflage. Now, sitting in his beat-up Honda Civic during lunch break, Gregory reviewed the intelligence files spread across his passenger seat. Old habits died hard, and information warfare had always been his specialty. Dr. Bradley Mullen was a creature of habit and ego. 42 years old, divorced once already, currently the head of cardiology at Desert Ridge Medical Center. His social media was a testament to his narcissism. Photos of his BMW, his golf handicap, expensive dinners at trendy restaurants. He lived alone in a $2.3 million house in Paradise Valley, with a mortgage that consumed most of his substantial income. What Brad didn't post about was his gambling problem. Gregory's financial investigation had revealed a pattern of large cash advances, trips to Las Vegas, and several loans from questionable sources. Dr. Brad Mullen was living paycheck to paycheck, just like the man whose wife he was stealing. Gregory's phone buzzed. A text from Samantha. "Have you signed the papers yet? My lawyer says you're stalling." Instead of responding, Gregory dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 years. Montoya Group International, answered a crisp female voice. "April Mooney, please. Tell her it's Gregory." April Mooney had been Gregory's personal attorney for 6 years, though she knew him only as the CEO of a private military contracting firm. To her, Gregory Montoya was a successful businessman who preferred to keep a low profile. She had no idea he was currently wearing a warehouse uniform and eating lunch from a vending machine. "Gregory." April's voice warmed considerably. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for months." "I've been undercover," Gregory said, which was technically true. "I need you to prepare some documents." "Of course." "What kind of documents?" "Divorce papers. And I want you to contact a Dr. Bradley Mullen at Desert Ridge Medical. Tell him you represent a consortium of investors interested in purchasing his debt portfolio." There was a pause. April Mooney was brilliant, which was why Gregory paid her 7 figures annually. "Are we acquiring someone's financial obligations for leverage purposes?" "We're creating opportunities for negotiation," Gregory corrected. "Also, I need you to establish a new shell company. Something medical sounding. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions should work." "Gregory, what exactly are you planning?" "Justice," Gregory replied. "How quickly can you move on the debt acquisition?" "If the price is right, 72 hours. Money is no object. Buy it all. Credit cards, personal loans, the works. I want Dr. Mullen to owe us, not some bank in Delaware." After ending the call, Gregory returned to his surveillance notes. He'd been watching both Samantha and Brad for weeks, documenting their routines, their vulnerabilities, their assumptions about the world around them. They thought they were clever, sneaking around behind the back of a broken-down veteran. They had no idea they were being hunted by someone who had brought down terrorists for a living. That evening, Gregory's younger brother Tyler stopped by the small apartment Gregory maintained as part of his cover. Tyler worked construction and was one of the few people who knew Gregory wasn't entirely what he seemed, though he didn't know the full extent of it. "You doing okay, man?" Tyler asked, cracking open a beer. "I know Mom's death hit you hard, and now this divorce stuff?" "I'm fine," Gregory assured him. "Better than fine, actually. I'm starting to remember who I am." Tyler frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I've been playing a role for too long, being someone I'm not. Sometimes you have to stop pretending to be weak and remind people why they should have been afraid all along. Greg, you're starting to sound like you did when you first came back from overseas. That scares me. Gregory looked at his younger brother, honest, hardworking Tyler who saw the world in simple terms of right and wrong. Remember when we were kids and Tommy Vasquez kept taking your lunch money? Yeah, until you made him stop. How did I make him stop? Tyler was quiet for a moment. You didn't fight him. You found out he was scared of spiders and put a tarantula in his locker. He never bothered me again. Exactly. I didn't beat him up. I found his weakness and exploited it psychologically. Violence is for people who lack imagination. What are you planning to do to Samantha and this doctor? Gregory smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. Nothing more, nothing less. 2 days later, Gregory implemented the first phase of his plan. He began showing up at places where Samantha and Brad met. Always just barely visible, never acknowledging them, but ensuring they saw him. The coffee shop near the medical center. The parking garage where they kissed between stolen moments. The hotel bar where they planned their future together. He wasn't following them exactly. He was simply existing in their space. A ghost from Samantha's conscience. A reminder that actions have consequences. The psychological pressure was immediate. Samantha's text became more frantic. Why haven't you signed the papers? Are you trying to make this difficult? Just let me go. But Gregory wasn't holding on. He was positioning his pieces on a chessboard that neither Samantha nor Brad realized they were playing on. Every move was calculated, every appearance strategically timed to maximize their discomfort. On Friday evening, as Gregory was leaving his warehouse job, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he'd been expecting. Mr. Montoya, this is Dr. Bradley Mullen. I believe we need to talk. About what, Dr. Mullen? About my wife, Brad said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Stay away from Samantha, or we're going to have a problem. Gregory let the silence stretch for exactly 7 seconds, long enough to create discomfort, not long enough to seem unnatural. Doctor, I think you may be confused about who has problems here. But if you'd like to discuss it, I'm sure we can arrange a meeting. Good. Tomorrow, noon, Desert Ridge Golf Club. Come alone. Wouldn't dream of bringing anyone else, Gregory replied, already smiling as he hung up. Dr. Bradley Mullen had just volunteered to walk into Gregory's trap. Chapter 4. The Doctor's Dilemma. The Desert Ridge Golf Club was exactly the kind of place Gregory had expected Brad Mullen to choose for their confrontation. Expensive, exclusive, and designed to intimidate people who didn't belong. The clubhouse reeked of old money and older prejudices, with polished wood paneling and portraits of distinguished white men lining the walls. Gregory arrived precisely at noon, wearing the same thrift store khakis and polo shirt he wore to job interviews. The hostess looked him up and down with barely concealed disdain before reluctantly leading him to the bar area where Brad was waiting. Dr. Bradley Mullen was everything Gregory had expected from his research, tall, conventionally handsome, with the kind of artificially perfect smile that came from expensive dental work. He wore golf attire that probably cost more than Gregory's monthly salary, and his Rolex caught the light as he gestured dismissively at Gregory's approach. So you're the famous Gregory Montoya, Brad said without standing or offering to shake hands. I have to say, you're exactly what I pictured. Gregory took the seat across from him, noting how Brad had positioned himself with his back to the window, a power play meant to put Gregory at a disadvantage with the light in his eyes. It was amateur psychology, the kind of thing taught in weekend seminars about winning through intimidation. And you're Dr. Bradley Mullen, Gregory replied calmly. Though I understand you prefer Brad when you're not hiding behind your medical degree. Brad's smile faltered slightly. Let's cut to the chase. I know you've been stalking Samantha and me. It needs to stop. Stalking is a strong word, Gregory said, signaling the bartender for a coffee. I prefer maintaining situational awareness. Old military habit. Right, the military. Brad's tone dripped with condescension. Samantha told me all about your war stories. Very quaint. But the war's over, soldier boy. Time to move on. Gregory studied Brad's face, cataloging every micro-expression. The slight tick near his left eye when he lied. The way his voice pitched higher when he was trying to project confidence he didn't feel. The defensive positioning of his shoulders. "You seem nervous, doctor," Gregory observed. "Is there something bothering you?" "Should there be?" Brad shot back, but Gregory caught the telltale pause, a fraction of a second too long, indicating deception. "I wouldn't know. I'm just a warehouse worker, after all. What could possibly worry a successful cardiologist about someone like me?" Brad leaned forward, dropping his voice. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Samantha doesn't love you anymore. Maybe she never did. She wants out, and you need to accept that and move on with your life." "That's interesting advice," Gregory said, accepting his coffee from the bartender. "Tell me, Brad, may I call you Brad? How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" The question hit like a physical blow. Brad's face flushed red, and his hands clenched into fists on the table. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't. Just like you don't know about the $47,000 you lost in Vegas last month, or the private loan you took out to cover your mortgage payment, or the fact that your ex-wife's alimony is bleeding you dry." Brad went pale. How do I know?" Gregory smiled, and for the first time, let a hint of his true nature show through. "Because knowledge is power, doctor, and power is something I understand very well." Before Brad could respond, Gregory's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, then showed the screen to Brad. It was from April Mooney. "Acquisition complete. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions now owns 100% of Target's outstanding debt. Total, $847,000. Brad stared at the phone, his face cycling through confusion, fear, and dawning comprehension. "What is this? What did you do?" "I bought you," Gregory said simply. "Every credit card, every personal loan, every outstanding debt you have. As of this morning, you don't owe various banks and lending institutions. You owe me. That's impossible. You're a warehouse worker. You don't have that kind of money." Gregory reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. Expensive cardstock with embossed lettering. He slid it across the table to Brad, who picked it up with shaking fingers. "Montoya Group International," Brad read aloud. "CO, Gregory Montoya." He looked up, his face ashen. "This is a joke. This has to be a joke. Call the number," Gregory suggested. "Ask for April Mooney, my attorney. She'll confirm that Phoenix Healthcare Solutions, a subsidiary of Montoya Group International, is now your primary creditor. She'll also explain the new terms of your debt." Brad fumbled for his phone, dialing the number with unsteady fingers. Gregory watched with clinical interest as Brad spoke to April, his face growing paler with each word. "That's not possible," Brad was saying into the phone. "The interest rate can't be legal." "What do you mean immediate full payment?" After a few more minutes of increasingly desperate conversation, Brad hung up and stared at Gregory with naked terror. "You just made your debt callable on demand," Gregory explained. "As of right now, you owe Phoenix Healthcare Solutions $847,000, payable immediately upon request. The interest rate is 18% annually, compounded daily. That's perfectly legal in Arizona, by the way, for commercial debt agreements. This is insane. I can't pay that kind of money. My house isn't worth that much, and actually, your house is worth $2.3 million, according to the most recent appraisal. Of course, you still owe $1.9 million on the mortgage, so your equity is only about $400,000. That leaves you roughly $447,000 short of what you owe me." Brad's hands were shaking now. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" Gregory repeated thoughtfully. "That's an excellent question. You see, Brad, I've spent the last several years pretending to be someone I'm not, playing the role of a broken-down veteran, a failed husband, a man with nothing to offer. It was an interesting experiment in human nature. I don't understand. You and my wife looked at me and saw weakness, saw someone you could discard without consequences, someone whose feelings didn't matter because he didn't matter. That was a mistake." Gregory leaned forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Here's what's going to happen, Dr. Mullen. You're going to break off your relationship with Samantha immediately. You're going to tell her that you've realized she's a married woman and that continuing the affair would be morally wrong. You're going to be convincing about it. And if I don't, then I call your debt immediately. $847,000 due in full. When you can't pay, and we both know you can't, I'll file for bankruptcy recovery. Your house, your car, your medical practice partnership, your country club membership, all of it will be liquidated to satisfy the debt. You'll be left with nothing. Brad stared at him, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. You're destroying my life over a woman who doesn't even love you. I'm not destroying anything, Gregory corrected. I'm simply revealing the consequences of your choices. You chose to pursue a married woman. You chose to accumulate debts you couldn't afford. You chose to gamble with money you didn't have. I'm just facilitating the natural outcomes of those decisions. This is revenge. This is justice, Gregory replied. There's a difference. Brad sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the business card as if it might change before his eyes. Finally, he looked up at Gregory with the expression of a man who had just realized he was drowning. How long do I have? To end things with Samantha? I'd suggest today would be appropriate. I'm not an unreasonable man, doctor. End the affair, maintain your distance from my wife, and your debt remains on standard terms. You'll have 30 years to pay it off at the agreed interest rate. Continue the affair, and I'll call it immediately. Gregory stood, leaving a $5 bill on the table for his coffee. Oh, and Brad, if you're thinking about telling Samantha about our conversation, I should mention that I have recordings of several of your private encounters. I'm sure your medical board would find them fascinating, given their policies about conduct with subordinates. As Gregory walked away, he could feel Brad's eyes on his back. In his mind, he was already calculating the next moves in his game. Brad would break up with Samantha. He was too much of a coward to do anything else. That would drive Samantha back to Gregory in confusion and desperation, at which point she would learn exactly who she had chosen to betray. The warehouse worker was gone. Gregory Montoya was back, and he was just getting started. Chapter 5, The Web Titans. Samantha Montoya's world began unraveling on a Tuesday evening at precisely 6:47 p.m. She was sitting in her car outside the Desert Ridge Medical Center, checking her makeup in the visor mirror before meeting Brad for dinner, when her phone rang. Sam, we need to talk. Brad's voice sounded strange, strained and distant. I'm literally in the parking lot, she laughed. Just come down in... No, not here. Not tonight. This needs to be over the phone. Something cold settled in Samantha's stomach. What needs to be over the phone? Brad, you're scaring me. There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of Brad's labored breathing. Samantha, I can't do this anymore. This affair, it's wrong. You're a married woman, and I should have respected that from the beginning. Are you joking? Samantha's voice pitched higher. Brad, this is not funny. Come down here right now, and... I'm sorry, Sam. I really am. But it's over. Don't call me. Don't come to the hospital. Just sign your divorce papers and try to work things out with Gregory. He deserves better than this. The line went dead. Samantha stared at her phone in disbelief, then immediately called back. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Same result. For 20 minutes, she sat in the parking lot, calling Brad's number over and over while her carefully constructed future crumbled around her. Finally, she drove home to the modest suburban house she shared with Gregory, her mind racing through every possible explanation for Brad's sudden change of heart. Gregory was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in, still wearing his warehouse uniform and eating a sandwich that looked like it came from a gas station. The sight of him, ordinary, unremarkable, defeated, suddenly filled her with a rage she couldn't contain. You did something, she accused, throwing her purse on the counter. Whatever happened with Brad, you're behind it. Gregory looked up from his sandwich with mild curiosity. I'm behind what? And who's Brad? Don't play dumb with me, Gregory. Dr. Mullen, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Oh, your boyfriend? Gregory nodded thoughtfully. The one you've been sneaking around with for 8 months? That Brad. Samantha's face went white. How did you? I'm not stupid, Sam. Distant, maybe. Depressed, probably. But not stupid. Gregory set down his sandwich and studied his wife with the same clinical detachment he might show a laboratory specimen. Working late at the clinic every night, new clothes you can't afford, That little smile you get when you're texting someone who isn't me. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? If you knew, why didn't you say anything? Because I want to see how far you'd go, Gregory replied. Turns out, the answer is divorce papers at my mother's funeral. That was quite a performance, by the way. Really drove the knife home. Samantha's initial shock was giving way to defensive anger. Maybe if you'd been the husband I needed instead of this pathetic shell of a man, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. The husband you needed, Gregory repeated slowly. Tell me, Sam, what kind of husband did you need? One with money? Status? A nice car and a big house? I needed a man with ambition, with drive, someone who wanted to build a life instead of just existing in this mediocre suburban purgatory you call happiness. Gregory nodded as if she'd confirmed something important. So it was about money. It was about respect. Samantha shouted, "Do you know what it's like being married to someone who works in a warehouse? Who drives a 15-year-old Honda and shops at thrift stores? I'm 32 years old, Gregory. This isn't the life I wanted. And Dr. Mullen offered you the life you wanted." Yes, he offered me partnership in a medical practice, a house in Paradise Valley, vacations in Europe, children who wouldn't be embarrassed by their father's job. Samantha trailed off, realizing she'd said too much. Children, Gregory said quietly. You were planning children with him. We were planning a future, something you've never been able to do. Gregory stood up slowly, and for the first time in months, Samantha saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. Sam, do you know what I did in the military? You were a communications specialist. You've told me 100 times. That's what it said on my official record. Do you know what I actually did? Something in his tone made Samantha step backward. What are you talking about? I was a psychological operations specialist. My job was to study people, find their weaknesses, and exploit them. I was very good at it. Gregory moved closer, and Samantha found herself backing toward the wall. For 8 years, I've been studying you, Sam. Learning what makes you tick, what you want, what you fear, how you think. You're scaring me. Good. Fear means you're finally paying attention. Gregory stopped just close enough that Samantha could smell his aftershave, the cheap drugstore kind she'd always nagged him to replace. You want to know why Brad suddenly broke up with you? Because I reminded him that actions have consequences. What did you do to him? I bought his debts. All of them. $847,000 worth. As of yesterday, Dr. Bradley Mullen owes me nearly $1 million callable on demand. Samantha stared at him in confusion. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. Gregory reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he extracted a black credit card with no spending limit and slid it across the counter to her. American Express Centurion card. There are only about 40,000 of these in the world. The initiation fee alone is $10,000. Samantha picked up the card with trembling fingers. It was heavy, made of metal, and bore Gregory's name in raised platinum lettering. This is fake, she whispered. Call the number on the back. Ask about the account balance. Instead, Samantha set the card down and looked at her husband, really looked at him for the first time in years. Who are you? I'm the man you married, Gregory replied. I'm also the man you tried to destroy. The question is, which one matters more to you now? Before Samantha could answer, Gregory's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. That's my attorney, he said. Dr. Mullen has just filed for bankruptcy protection. Apparently, someone called his debt immediately. I wonder who that could have been. Samantha sank into a kitchen chair, her legs no longer able to support her. This is insane. You're destroying innocent people. Innocent. Gregory's voice cut through her protest like a blade. Sam, you've been planning to leave me for another man. You served me divorce papers at my mother's funeral. You just admitted you were planning to have children with your lover. In what universe are you innocent? But Brad didn't know. Brad knew exactly what he was doing. He pursued a married woman, used his position of authority to seduce a subordinate, and thought he could steal my wife without consequences. He was wrong. Gregory moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a beer, popping it open with casual indifference. Here's what's going to happen next, Sam. You're going to withdraw those divorce papers. You're going to stop seeing Dr. Mullen. Not that he'll want to see you anyway, given his current financial difficulties. And you're going to think very carefully about whether you want to remain married to a warehouse worker or to someone else entirely. What do you mean, someone else? Gregory smiled, and this time there was genuine amusement in it. I mean, you're about to discover exactly who you married 8 years ago. Fair warning, you might not like what you find. As if on cue, there was a knock at the front door. Gregory glanced at his watch. Right on time. Who is that? Your inheritance, Gregory said, walking toward the door. The one I mentioned at the cemetery. I think it's time you learned about your husband's family business. Through the front window, Samantha could see a black Mercedes sedan in their driveway and a woman in an expensive suit standing on their doorstep. Nothing about this moment fit with the reality she thought she knew. Gregory opened the door, and the woman stepped inside with the confidence of someone accustomed to deference. Mrs. Montoya, she said, extending a manicured hand to Samantha. I'm April Mooney, your husband's attorney. We have quite a lot to discuss. As the implications began to sink in, Samantha realized that everything she thought she knew about her life had been carefully constructed lies. The only question now was whether Gregory was saving her from her mistakes or about to bury her beneath them. Chapter 6: Revelations and Reckonings. April Mooney commanded the modest living room like a boardroom, her $3,000 suit and Hermes briefcase transforming the space from suburban ordinary to something approaching corporate significance. She arranged her documents on the coffee table with methodical precision while Samantha sat frozen on the couch, still processing the seismic shift in her reality. Before we begin, April said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses, I should clarify my role here. For the past 6 years, I've represented Montoya Group International and its various subsidiaries. This is the first time I've had the pleasure of meeting the CEO's wife. CEO? Samantha's voice cracked on the word. Gregory, still wearing his warehouse uniform, sat across from them in his usual recliner, the one Samantha had always nagged him to replace because it didn't match their decor. Now she wondered if he'd kept it as part of his elaborate disguise. Mrs. Montoya, April continued, opening her briefcase. Your husband is one of the most successful private military contractors in the United States. Montoya Group International provides security consulting, intelligence analysis, and specialized personnel to governments and corporations worldwide. Our annual revenue last year was $347 million. Samantha looked between April and Gregory, her mind struggling to reconcile this information with the man who brought home pay stubs from Phoenix Warehousing Solutions. That's impossible. Greg works at a warehouse. He makes $12 an hour. That's his cover. April explained patiently. Mr. Montoya has maintained this civilian identity since leaving active military service. It's been quite effective for maintaining operational security and identifying potential security risks. The phrase security risks hung in the air like a physical presence. Samantha felt the weight of its implication settling on her shoulders. Show her the portfolio summary, Gregory said quietly. April handed Samantha a leather folder containing several documents. The first page was letterhead from Credit Suisse Private Banking, addressed to Gregory Montoya. The numbers were staggering. Investment accounts totaling over $200 million, real estate holdings worth $80 million, and business interests spanning 3 continents. This can't be real, Samantha whispered, but even as she said it, she was remembering things. Gregory's inexplicable calm during financial emergencies, his ability to find money when they needed it, the way he never seemed worried about bills, even when their checking account was nearly empty. Page 4 shows the corporate structure, April said. Your husband owns controlling interests in 17 companies, including the warehouse where he currently works. Samantha flipped to page 4 and found a complex organizational chart. At the top was Montoya Holdings, with Gregory listed as sole owner. Below it, dozens of subsidiaries branched out like a family tree. Phoenix Warehousing Solutions was there, along with companies she'd never heard of: Mountain Peak Security, Desert Storm Logistics, Cactus Financial Services. You own the warehouse? She asked Gregory. On a lot of things, he replied, including, as of yesterday, Dr. Mullen's debt portfolio. April consulted her notes. Speaking of which, Phoenix Healthcare Solutions has filed for immediate debt recovery. Dr. Mullen's bankruptcy petition was denied due to fraudulent transfer allegations. He'll need to liquidate his assets to satisfy the obligation. What does that mean? Samantha asked. It means Brad is about to lose everything, Gregory said simply. His house, his cars, his partnership in the medical practice. By next month, he'll be lucky to qualify for a studio apartment. The callousness in Gregory's voice chilled Samantha more than the financial revelations. This wasn't the man she'd married. Or maybe it was, and she'd never really known him at all. Why? She whispered. Why did you hide all this from me? Gregory leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and for a moment she glimpsed the predator beneath the warehouse worker's facade. Because I needed to know who you really were. What you would do when you thought I had nothing to offer. That's not fair. You lied to me for 8 years. I maintained operational security, Gregory corrected. There's a difference. You, on the other hand, committed adultery and attempted to steal my assets through fraudulent divorce proceedings. April cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should discuss the legal implications. Mrs. Montoya, your divorce petition includes claims of abandonment and financial neglect. Given the evidence of your husband's actual financial status, those claims could be considered perjury. Perjury? Samantha's voice rose to near hysteria. I didn't know about any of this. Ignorance isn't a defense when you're making sworn statements to the court, April replied. However, your husband has asked me to offer you an alternative to criminal prosecution. Gregory reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, similar to the one Samantha had used to serve in divorce papers, but thicker. Your real inheritance, he said, sliding it across the coffee table. With shaking hands, Samantha opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents, but these weren't divorce papers. They were transfer agreements, property deeds, and financial statements. Her name appeared on several of them. What is this? A choice, Gregory said. Door number 1. You can proceed with the divorce. I'll liquidate enough assets to give you half of our apparent net worth, about $50,000, based on what you thought we had. You'll also face perjury charges, civil penalties for attempted fraud, and I'll ensure that your relationship with Dr. Mullen becomes part of the public record. Samantha felt sick. What's door number 2? You withdraw the divorce petition. We enter marriage counseling with a therapist of my choosing, someone with appropriate security clearance to discuss my actual profession. You accept that I am exactly who I've always been, and you decide whether you can love that person or not. And if I choose door number 2, what do I get? Gregory gestured to the papers in her lap. Everything. Joint ownership of all properties, full access to all accounts, and a lifestyle that makes Dr. Mullen look like a pauper. You want to respect, Sam? I can give you more respect than you ever imagined. You want a status? I can put you in rooms where senators ask for your opinion. You wanted financial security? I can make you wealthy enough that money becomes irrelevant. The offer hung between them like a loaded weapon. Samantha stared at the documents, seeing dollar amounts that made her head spin. Properties in Aspen, Monaco, and the Cayman Islands. Investment accounts that generated more interest in a month than she made in a year. But there are conditions, Gregory continued. You will never lie to me again. You will never cheat on me again. And you will never, ever, mistake my kindness for weakness. Because what I did to Dr. Mullen was kindness, Samantha. What I'll do to my enemies is something else entirely. April checked her watch. Mrs. Montoya, I need a decision. I have other appointments, and frankly, this offer expires when I leave this room. Samantha looked at Gregory, really looked at him, and saw the man she'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. But she also saw something else now. The cold intelligence of someone who thought several moves ahead, the patience of a predator, and the absolute certainty of someone who never lost. The Brad situation, she said finally. Is there any way to help him? He didn't know about your real identity. Gregory's expression didn't change. Dr. Mullen made his choices with full knowledge that you were married. He pursued a relationship with a subordinate employee, violated his professional ethics, and attempted to steal another man's wife. The consequences are proportional to his actions, but destroying his life seems. Dr. Mullen destroyed his own life. Gregory interrupted. I simply revealed the destruction. There's a difference. Samantha realized then that there would be no mercy for Brad, no matter what she chose. Gregory had already decided his fate with the same methodical precision he'd applied to their marriage. The only question was whether she would stand with her husband or fall with her lover. She picked up a pen from April's briefcase and signed the withdrawal papers for the divorce petition. Good choice, Gregory said, and for the first time in months, his smile seemed genuine. Now, Mrs. Montoya, let me introduce you to your real life. As April gathered her documents and prepared to leave, Samantha felt the weight of her new reality settling around her like an expensive coat. She had everything she thought she wanted: wealth, status, power. She also had a husband who had just demonstrated that crossing him carried consequences she couldn't have imagined. The warehouse worker was gone. In his place sat a man who controlled fortunes and destroyed enemies with equal ease. Whether he was her salvation or her greatest threat remained to be seen. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. 2 weeks later, the Montoya estate in Paradise Valley was a monument to carefully concealed wealth. 8,000 square feet of modern architecture nestled behind 12-foot walls and sophisticated security systems. Samantha had driven past houses like this 1,000 times, never imagining she would live in one. Now, standing in the marble-floored foyer, she felt like an imposter in her own life. The staff will be here tomorrow, Gregory explained, leading her through rooms that belonged in architectural magazines. Housekeeping, groundskeeping, security. I've kept the permanent staff to a minimum for operational reasons, but we'll need full coverage now that you're part of the program. Part of the program? Samantha was still adjusting to Gregory's transformation. Gone were the thrift store clothes and defeated posture. In their place was a man who wore $5,000 suits with casual ease and commanded attention without raising his voice. My public identity, Gregory clarified. Mrs. Montoya, wife of a successful defense contractor. There will be social obligations, charity events, business dinners. People will be watching you, evaluating you, looking for weaknesses they can exploit. The word weaknesses carried particular weight coming from Gregory. Over the past 2 weeks, Samantha had learned exactly how her husband identified and exploited such vulnerabilities. Dr. Bradley Mullen's fall had been swift and comprehensive. His medical partnership was dissolved when Phoenix Healthcare Solutions called his personal guarantees. His house was in foreclosure, his cars repossessed, his country club membership terminated. Samantha had driven past his apartment complex, a modest 2-bedroom unit in Tempe that was a far cry from his former mansion. Is he? She had asked Gregory that morning, unable to finish the question. Alive? Yes. Destroyed? Absolutely. Learned his lesson? We'll see. Now, standing in what was apparently her new dining room, Samantha wondered if she had learned hers. There's something else, Gregory said, pouring himself a glass of whiskey from a crystal decanter. Someone's been asking questions about you. About us. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest Dr. Mullen hasn't accepted his new circumstances as gracefully as I'd hoped. A chill ran down Samantha's spine. What do you mean? Gregory activated a tablet mounted on the wall, bringing up a series of security camera feeds. This morning, Brad hired a private investigator. This afternoon, that investigator began surveilling our old house. Tonight, they followed you to the grocery store. On the screen, Samantha could see herself walking into a Whole Foods, unaware that a nondescript sedan was recording her movements. Why would Brad do that? Because he's desperate, Gregory replied. He's lost everything, and he's looking for someone to blame other than himself. You're the most obvious target. What can he do? I mean, legally? Gregory's laugh was cold. Sam, you're thinking like a civilian. Brad isn't concerned with legality right now. He's thinking about revenge. As if summoned by their conversation, Gregory's phone rang. The caller ID showed Dave Jones, Gregory's old army buddy who had attended their wedding and knew at least some of the truth about Gregory's capabilities. Dave, Gregory answered, putting the call on speaker. What's the situation? We have a problem, brother. Your boy Mullen just tried to hire muscle. Street-level guys, nothing sophisticated, but they're talking about sending a message to your wife. Samantha's blood turned to ice. Muscle? Like to hurt me? Nothing confirmed yet, Dave continued. But the conversation was recorded. Mullen's talking about making her pay for destroying his life. He seems to think if he hurts her, you'll back off. Gregory's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Where is he now? Home. The apartment in Tempe. My sources say he's been drinking heavily, making increasingly aggressive statements about you and Samantha. I see. Gregory's voice was perfectly calm, which somehow made it more frightening. Thank you for the intelligence, Dave. We'll handle it from here. After ending the call, Gregory walked to a wall safe hidden behind what appeared to be decorative paneling. He entered a code and withdrew several items. A pistol, which he checked and holstered, a tablet containing various documents, and a small device that looked like a garage door opener. Where are you going? Samantha asked, though part of her already knew. To have a conversation with Dr. Mullen, Gregory replied, shrugging on a jacket that concealed his weapon. He seems to have misunderstood the nature of our agreement. Greg, you can't just... Can't what? He turned to face her, and for the first time since their reconciliation, Samantha saw the soldier he'd once been. Can't protect my wife? Can't respond to threats against my family? What exactly can I do, Sam? I just meant, maybe we should call the police. And tell them what? That a man you were having an affair with is now threatening you? That your husband isn't really a warehouse worker, but a private military contractor with the resources to destroy people's lives? How do you think that conversation would go? Samantha realized he was right. Their situation was far too complex for conventional law enforcement. Then what are you going to do to him? Gregory considered the question seriously. That depends entirely on Dr. Mullen. If he's reasonable, we'll have a civilized discussion about boundaries and consequences. If he's not, he left the sentence unfinished, but the implications hung in the air like smoke. I want to come with you, Samantha said suddenly. Absolutely not. He's threatening me because of our relationship. I should be part of resolving it. Gregory studied her for a long moment. Sam, what I'm about to do isn't something you want to witness. The man you married, the kind, patient warehouse worker, he was real, but he was also just one facet of who I am. The other facets aren't as pleasant. I need to see, she insisted. I need to understand who you really are. After a long pause, Gregory nodded. Fine, but you follow my instructions exactly, and you don't interfere no matter what you see. Understood. Understood. As they drove through the Phoenix night toward Brad's apartment, Samantha reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 3 weeks ago, she had been planning to divorce her husband and marry another man. Now she was accompanying that same husband to confront her former lover about threats of violence. The transformation was surreal, but what troubled her most was how natural it felt. Despite everything, the lies, the manipulation, the calculated destruction of Brad's life, she found herself trusting Gregory completely. Whether that was love, Stockholm Syndrome, or simple recognition of power, she couldn't say. What she did know was that Dr. Bradley Mullen had made a serious mistake in threatening Gregory Montoya's wife. Whatever happened next, Brad had brought it on himself. The soldier was going to war, and Samantha was finally going to see what that meant. Chapter 8. No Mercy. Brad Mullen's apartment complex was the kind of place where security consisted of a broken gate and flickering parking lot lights. Gregory parked his Mercedes, not the beat-up Honda he'd driven for 3 years, in a visitor's space and surveyed the building with professional assessment. Third floor, Unit 312, he told Samantha. 2 exits from the building, stairwells at each end. His windows face the parking lot, so he'll see us coming if he's watching. Is he dangerous? Samantha asked, noting how Gregory's demeanor had shifted into something cold and tactical. Every desperate man is dangerous, Gregory replied. The question is how dangerous, and whether he's smart enough to recognize when he's outmatched. They climbed the external staircase to the 3rd floor, passing peeling paint and the smell of cigarettes and despair. Gregory moved with the fluid silence of someone trained in urban infiltration, while Samantha tried to match his quiet footsteps. At Unit 312, Gregory positioned himself to one side of the door, the side that would provide cover if someone fired through it. He gestured for Samantha to stand behind him, then knocked twice. "Brad, it's Gregory. Open the door." There was no immediate response, but they could hear movement inside, the shuffle of feet, the clink of glass on glass. When Brad finally spoke, his voice was slurred with alcohol and raw with emotion. "Go away, Greg. I don't want to talk to you." "That's unfortunate," Gregory replied conversationally, "because we really need to discuss your recent conversation with some unsavory individuals about my wife." Silence. Then the sound of multiple locks being undone. Brad opened the door, but left the security chain attached, peering out through the 3-inch gap. He looked terrible, unshaven, bloodshot eyes, wearing the same clothes he'd probably slept in. The smell of whiskey and unwashed bodies wafted through the opening. "I didn't do anything," Brad said, not meeting Gregory's eyes. "You hired Rico Vasquez and Miguel Santos to send a message to Samantha," Gregory stated matter-of-factly. "You offered them $5,000 to hurt her badly enough that I would understand the consequences of destroying your life." "That's not. I never said hurt her. I just wanted to scare." "Brad," Gregory interrupted gently, "remove the chain and let us in. We need to have this conversation properly. I don't have to let you in. This is my home." Gregory smiled, and something in that expression made Brad step backward. "Your home? Brad, you're 3 months behind on rent. Tomorrow morning, Phoenix Property Management, a subsidiary of Montoya Holdings, will file eviction proceedings. Your home is whatever I choose to let you keep." The implications hit Brad like a physical blow. "You own this building too?" "I own a lot of buildings." "Remove the chain, Brad." With shaking hands, Brad undid the security chain and opened the door. The apartment was a disaster. Empty bottles, takeout containers, clothes scattered everywhere. It smelled like defeat and rage. "You destroyed my life," Brad said as they entered. "I lost everything because of you." "No," Gregory corrected, moving to the center of the small living room while keeping his hands visible and ready. "You lost everything because you made poor choices. I simply revealed the consequences of those choices." "Poor choices." Brad's voice rose to a shout. "I fell in love. That's not a crime." "You pursued a married woman," Gregory replied. "You violated your professional ethics. You accumulated debts you couldn't afford. You gambled with money you didn't have. Those were choices, Brad. Each one led to the next." Samantha watched the exchange from near the door, seeing her former lover through new eyes. The confident, successful doctor she'd been attracted to was gone, replaced by this broken, desperate man. She felt pity for him, but also a growing understanding of Gregory's methods. "What do you want?" Brad asked, slumping into a chair that had seen better days. "I want you to call Rico and Miguel," Gregory said, producing his phone. "I want you to tell them the job is canceled and that they should forget they ever met you. And if I don't..." Gregory's expression didn't change, but he reached into his jacket and withdrew his pistol, holding it casually at his side. "Then I'll call them myself. Rico Vasquez has outstanding warrants in 3 states. Miguel Santos has been selling drugs to high school students. I imagine the DEA would be very interested in their current activities." Brad stared at the gun, then at Gregory's face. "You'd really destroy them too? They're nobody to you." "They threatened my wife," Gregory said simply. "That makes them somebody to me. This is insane. You can't control everyone's life like this." "Can't I?" Gregory tilted his head slightly. "Brad, in the past month, I've destroyed your career, eliminated your wealth, and reduced you to living in this apartment that I also happen to own. If you think there are limits to what I can do, you haven't been paying attention." The weight of Gregory's power settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Brad made the call, his voice shaking as he told Rico and Miguel to forget they'd ever met. When he finished, Gregory took the phone and deleted their contact information. "Good," Gregory said. "Now we need to discuss your future." "What future? You've taken everything." "I've taken what you tried to steal from me," Gregory corrected. Your future depends entirely on the choices you make from this point forward. Gregory moved to the window and looked out at the parking lot below. You have two options, Brad. Option 1. You leave Phoenix tonight. You drive to another state, find another job, and build a new life somewhere else. You never contact Samantha again, you never mention my name to anyone, and you never return to Arizona. And option 2. Gregory turned back to face him, and his expression was utterly cold. You stay, and I finish what I started. Within a week, you'll be unemployed, homeless, and facing criminal charges for conspiracy to commit assault. Within a month, you'll be in prison, where I'm sure the other inmates will be very interested to learn about your threats against a woman. That's not a choice. That's extortion. That's consequences, Gregory replied. You threatened my wife, Brad. Did you really think I would let that slide? Brad looked at Samantha for the first time since they'd entered. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually care about me? Samantha felt the weight of both men's attention. The honest answer was complicated. She had cared about Brad, but mainly for what he represented. Escape from a life she thought was beneath her. Now, seeing him broken and desperate, she realized that what she'd felt was attraction to his status, not love for the man himself. I thought I did, she said finally, but I was wrong about a lot of things. Brad's face crumbled. I lost everything for you. My career, my house, my future. And it meant nothing to you. You lost everything because you tried to take what wasn't yours, Gregory said firmly. Just like you're trying to blame Samantha for your choices instead of accepting responsibility for them. Gregory holstered his weapon and pulled out a business card. Here's the contact information for a moving company. They'll pack your belongings and have you out of Phoenix by tomorrow night. There's also $5,000 cash to help you get started somewhere else. You're paying me to leave? I'm paying you to choose the easy path instead of the hard one. Whether you take that money or not is up to you. Brad stared at the business card for a long moment, then looked around his destroyed apartment. Where am I supposed to go? Anywhere but here, Gregory replied. I suggest somewhere far from Arizona, with a low cost of living and opportunities in the medical field. Maybe a small town that needs a doctor more than they need to check references too carefully. It was, Samantha realized, both generous and utterly ruthless. Gregory was giving Brad a chance to rebuild his life, but only on terms that ensured he would never threaten them again. If I leave, Brad said quietly, will you leave me alone? If you leave and stay gone, yes. If you ever return to Arizona, or if you ever contact my wife again, or if you ever mention my name to anyone, then we'll have this conversation again. And next time, there won't be options. Brad nodded slowly, the fight finally going out of him. I'll leave. Good choice, Gregory said. The moving company will be here at 8 a.m. Don't be late. As they left the apartment, Samantha felt a mixture of relief and unease. Gregory had resolved the threat without violence, but the casual way he wielded power was both impressive and terrifying. Do you think he'll actually leave? She asked as they descended the stairs. He'll leave, Gregory said with certainty. Men like Brad always choose survival over principle when it comes down to it. And if he doesn't, Gregory's smile was cold as winter. Then he'll learn that I was being kind tonight. As they drove away from the apartment complex, Samantha understood that she had witnessed something important. Her husband's version of mercy. It was efficient, final, and absolute, but it was mercy nonetheless. Dr. Bradley Mullen would live, but his life in Phoenix was over. The man who had tried to steal Gregory's wife and then threatened her with violence would spend the rest of his days looking over his shoulder, knowing that his survival depended on never crossing Gregory Montoya again. The soldier had won without firing a shot, and his enemies had been scattered to the winds. Chapter 9. The Price of Everything. 6 months later, the Montoya Foundation's annual charity gala was the kind of event that made Phoenix's social elite scramble for invitations. Held at the Four Seasons Resort, it raised money for veteran services while showcasing the city's most influential power brokers. Samantha moved through the crowd in a $15,000 designer gown, accepting compliments and making small talk with senators, CEOs, and society wives who treated her with the deference reserved for serious money. Mrs. Montoya approached Margaret Caldwell, the mayor's wife, I wanted to thank you personally for the Foundation's contribution to the Children's Hospital. $500,000 will make such a difference. It's our pleasure, Samantha replied with practiced grace. Gregory believes strongly in supporting our community. As if summoned by his name, Gregory appeared at her side, resplendent in a tuxedo that cost more than some people's annual salary. To the gathered elite, he was exactly what he appeared to be, a successful defense contractor who had built an empire through intelligence and determination. Ladies, Gregory said, nodding to Margaret and her companions. I hope you're enjoying the evening. Wonderful event, as always, Margaret gushed. Your wife was just telling us about the hospital donation. Just doing our part, Gregory replied modestly. Arizona has been good to us. It's important to give back. As the women drifted away to mingle with other donors, Samantha studied her husband's profile. 6 months of living as Gregory's true wife had taught her many things about power, wealth, and the careful choreography required to maintain both. Any word from Phoenix Property Management? She asked quietly. The Tempe building is fully leased again, Gregory replied. No issues with the new tenants. It was their coded way of discussing Brad Mullen, who had indeed left Arizona and never returned. Gregory's network of contacts occasionally provided updates. Brad was working at a rural clinic in Montana, living quietly and making no trouble for anyone. The message had been received and understood. In the other matter, Gregory's expression darkened slightly. Tyler's still refusing to accept help with his construction business. He thinks I'm trying to buy his loyalty. This was the one relationship Gregory hadn't been able to control or repair. His younger brother Tyler had learned the truth about Gregory's wealth and felt betrayed by years of deception. Despite Gregory's attempts to share his fortune, offers to invest in Tyler's construction company, to pay off his mortgage, to provide opportunities, Tyler had cut off contact entirely. He'll come around, Samantha said, though she wasn't certain she believed it. Maybe, or maybe some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. It was a rare admission of vulnerability from Gregory, and Samantha found herself genuinely moved by his pain. Tyler's rejection seemed to hurt Gregory more than all his enemies' attempts at revenge combined. Mr. Montoya, a young man in an expensive suit, approached nervously. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here who'd like to meet you. Gregory's demeanor shifted instantly into alert professionalism. Who? Senator Patricia Hayes. She says you served together. Colonel Hayes, now Senator Hayes, had been Gregory's commanding officer during his most classified operations. Her presence at a civilian charity event meant either a coincidence or something more significant. Of course, Gregory said smoothly. Where is she? They were led to a private terrace overlooking the resort's golf course, where a distinguished woman in her early 60s stood alone, gazing at the desert landscape. Gregory Montoya, she said without turning around. Or should I say, warehouse worker? Ma'am, Gregory replied formally. It's good to see you again. Senator Hayes turned to face them, her sharp eyes taking in Gregory's transformation and Samantha's presence. Quite a change from the last time we met. That was a supply depot in Kandahar, if I recall correctly. Different circumstances, Gregory agreed. Indeed. Hayes extended her hand to Samantha. You must be the famous Mrs. Montoya. I've heard interesting things about your marriage. Samantha felt like she was being evaluated by a particularly dangerous predator. Senator Hayes, Gregory's mentioned you. I'm sure he has. Gregory, might I have a word? Privately. Gregory glanced at Samantha, who nodded and moved to the far end of the terrace, still within sight but out of earshot. Your transition to civilian life has been eventful, Hayes said quietly. We've been monitoring the situation with Dr. Mullen. Impressive work, though perhaps a bit heavy-handed for domestic issues. He threatened my wife, Gregory replied simply. Yes, well, that's actually why I'm here. We have a situation developing that might benefit from your particular skill set. Off the books, of course. Gregory was quiet for a moment. I'm retired, ma'am. Are you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've simply changed theaters of operation. You've built an impressive cover identity, established extensive financial resources, and demonstrated your ability to neutralize threats effectively. That's not retirement, Gregory. That's evolution. What kind of situation? Hayes smiled coldly. The kind that pays very well and serves national interests. The kind that might require someone with your background to make certain problems disappear permanently. I'm listening. For the next 10 minutes, Hayes outlined a scenario involving international arms dealers, compromised government officials, and threats to national security that couldn't be addressed through conventional channels. The work would be lucrative, tens of millions in compensation, but it would also mean returning to the shadows Gregory had supposedly left behind. Think about it, Hayes concluded. Your country needs you, Gregory. More importantly, your country can pay you what you're worth. After Hayes left, Samantha rejoined Gregory on the terrace. What was that about? A job offer, Gregory said thoughtfully. What kind of job? Gregory looked at his wife. Beautiful, elegant, and finally understanding the true nature of the man she'd married. The kind I used to do. The kind that makes all this possible. He gestured to encompass their wealth and status. Are you considering it? I'm considering whether I can afford not to. Our lifestyle requires capital, Sam. The foundation, the charities, maintaining our position in society, it all costs money. My investments are solid, but they're not infinite. Samantha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert evening. What would it mean? This job. It would mean travel, extended absences, situations where you wouldn't be able to contact me for weeks or months at a time. Gregory paused. It would also mean that some people might try to use you to get to me. You need protection, security, protocols for your own safety. Dangerous people? The most dangerous people in the world, Gregory confirmed, but also the most profitable to eliminate. They stood in silence, looking out over the glittering lights of Phoenix. 6 months ago, Samantha had been planning to divorce the warehouse worker she thought she'd married. Now she was contemplating life as the wife of an international operator who killed people for money and patriotism in equal measure. If you take this job, she said finally, what happens to us? To our marriage? Gregory turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw the same cold calculation that had destroyed Brad Mullen and built their fortune. That depends on you, Sam. Can you love a man who does terrible things for good reasons? Can you live with wealth that comes from violence? Can you be the wife of someone who has enemies in governments and criminal organizations around the world? It was, Samantha realized, the final test, not of her loyalty that had been proven when she chose to stay married to him, but of her courage. Gregory was offering her a life of unimaginable luxury and unconscionable danger, power beyond most people's dreams and risks that could destroy them both. Yes, she said without hesitation. I can live with all of it. Gregory smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached his eyes. Then we should probably head back to the party. Senator Hayes will want an answer by morning, and we have appearances to maintain. As they walked back into the gala, Samantha reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had started as a woman who thought she deserved better than a warehouse worker. Now she was the wife of a man who could topple governments and had chosen her as his partner in that dangerous work. Gregory had never forgiven her betrayal. She understood that now. He had simply decided that she was more valuable as an ally than as an enemy, and had offered her the chance to earn her place in his world through loyalty and strength rather than love and trust. It wasn't the marriage she had planned, but it was the one she deserved. And as Gregory's hand found hers in the crowded ballroom, surrounded by Phoenix's elite who had no idea what kind of man they were celebrating, Samantha Montoya smiled and accepted her inheritance. A life of beautiful lies and terrible truths, where the price of everything was paid in other people's blood. The warehouse worker was